Welcome to War's Sleep Stories. Today we'll be listening to 4 relaxing, true war stories to make you fall asleep. In the quiet aftermath of World War II, as Europe sought to rebuild from the ashes of conflict, a clandestine operation began to take shape. This secret endeavor, known as Operation Gladio, was orchestrated by Western intelligence agencies to counter potential Soviet influence and invasion during the burgeoning Cold War. Shrouded in secrecy, Gladio's intricate network of stay-behind armies spanned across Western Europe, weaving a complex tapestry of espionage and covert operations that would remain concealed for decades. In the early 1950s, amidst the rising tensions of the Cold War, Western nations perceived a growing threat from the Soviet Union and its expanding influence over Eastern Europe. To counter this, NATO, along with the CIA and MI6, initiated the creation of secret stay-behind armies across Western Europe. These clandestine groups were designed to operate behind enemy lines in the event of a Soviet invasion, conducting guerrilla warfare and espionage to disrupt and resist occupation. The operation was codenamed Gladio, derived from the Latin word for a Roman short sword, symbolizing a hidden weapon ready to strike from the shadows. Each participating country developed its own network, coordinated under the broader NATO strategy, but often unbeknownst to their own governments. This secrecy was deemed essential to maintain the effectiveness and security of the operations. Training for Gladio operatives was rigorous and covert, often conducted in remote locations to avoid detection. Recruits were trained in sabotage, guerrilla tactics, and intelligence gathering, preparing them for the possibility of a Soviet invasion that, fortunately, never materialized. Despite the lack of active deployment, these secret armies remained in place for decades, their existence known only to a select few. The establishment of Operation Gladio reflected the pervasive fear and mistrust that characterized the Cold War era. While intended as a defensive measure, the secrecy and autonomy of these networks would later lead to controversy and allegations of misuse, casting a shadow over their original purpose. Italy played a central role in Operation Gladio, hosting one of the most extensive stay-behind networks in Western Europe. Established with the assistance of the CIA and NATO, the Italian branch of Gladio was intended to counter the significant influence of the Italian Communist Party during the post-war years. The network was equipped with hidden arms caches and maintained clandestine communication lines, all designed to facilitate resistance in the event of a Soviet invasion. The existence of Gladio in Italy remained a closely guarded secret until 1990, when then Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti publicly acknowledged the operation's presence in the country. This revelation came as a shock to many Italians and sparked widespread debate and investigation. Concerns were raised about the network's potential involvement in domestic terrorism and political manipulation during the tumultuous years of Laid, a period marked by social unrest and violent extremism. Parliamentary inquiries sought to uncover the extent of Gladio's activities and its connections to various incidents of political violence. While definitive evidence linking Gladio to specific acts of terrorism remained elusive, the mere possibility of such involvement cast a pall over the operation's legitimacy. The Italian government's acknowledgement of Gladio also led to similar revelations in other European countries, prompting a broader re-examination of Cold War-era covert operations. The disclosure of Operation Gladio in Italy underscored the complexities and ethical dilemmas inherent in secret defense strategies. While conceived as a safeguard against external threats, the lack of transparency and oversight raised questions about the potential for abuse and the impact on democratic institutions. The legacy of Gladio in Italy remains a subject of historical inquiry and debate, reflecting the enduring tensions between security and civil liberties. In the heart of Western Europe, Belgium's involvement in Operation Gladio mirrored the clandestine activities unfolding across the continent. The Belgian stay-behind network was established with the same objective, to prepare for resistance in the event of a Soviet invasion. However, like its counterparts, the Belgian operation remained shrouded in secrecy, its existence unknown to the public and many government officials. The veil of secrecy was lifted in 1990, when the existence of the Belgian stay-behind network was publicly acknowledged. This disclosure came in the wake of revelations in Italy and led to a wave of parliamentary investigations across Europe. In Belgium, the revelation prompted questions about the network's activities and its oversight, particularly concerning its potential involvement in domestic affairs beyond its original mandate. The Belgian Parliament conducted inquiries to assess the scope and legality of the stay-behind operations. While the investigations confirmed the existence of the network, they also highlighted a lack of clear oversight and raised concerns about the implications of such clandestine structures operating within a democratic society. The findings contributed to a broader European discourse on the balance between national security and governmental transparency. The Belgian experience with Operation Gladio exemplified the challenges faced by Western European nations in reconciling the necessity of covert defense measures with the principles of democratic accountability. The revelations underscored the importance of oversight and the potential risks posed by secret operations, even when designed with national security in mind. The legacy of Gladio in Belgium remains a poignant reminder of the complexities inherent in safeguarding freedom during times of geopolitical tension. In post-war France, the establishment of a stay-behind network was driven by the same apprehensions that motivated other Western European nations. The French secret army, integrated into the broader framework of Operation Gladio, was designed to act as a formidable resistance force in the event of a Soviet invasion. This clandestine organization operated under strict secrecy, with its existence concealed from the public and many government officials. The salty breeze swept across the Pacific as waves lapped against the steel hull of the USS Enterprise. June 1942 marked a turning point in the war, though few aboard knew just how pivotal their actions would be. The Battle of Midway was imminent, a confrontation that would determine the fate of the Pacific. For weeks, cryptographers at Station Hypo in Hawaii had worked tirelessly to decode Japanese transmissions. Their breakthrough revealed that Japan's next target was Midway Atoll, a tiny but strategically vital piece of land. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, had made a daring decision. Despite being outnumbered, he chose to confront the Japanese force head-on. Aboard the USS Enterprise, Rear Admiral William Halsey, who had fallen ill. Calm and methodical, Spruan studied the report with a quiet intensity. He knew the stakes were monumental, and though his experience as a carrier task force commander was limited, he resolved to lead with clarity and purpose. He confided to Scalesio, the solution did not run counter to his blood. Emira, what can we do? Below deck, Lieutenant Richard Dick Best ran through pre-flight checks on his Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bomber. A veteran pilot, Best had a reputation for precision and determination. Around him, younger aviators buzzed with nervous energy, the thought of facing the formidable Japanese fleet, a force that included the the carriers Akagi, Kaga, Doryu, and Hiryu, mounted troops highest on his dive bomber. Above the barracks decks, a Marine lieutenant, but Best and his comrades trusted their training and the leadership above them. Meanwhile, on the Japanese flagship Yamato, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto reviewed his plan. Yamamoto's strategy was bold, designed to lure the American fleet into a trap. Having orchestrated the attack on Pearl Harbor, Yamamoto believed that crippling the U.S. Navy at Midway would secure Japan's dominance in the Pacific. Commander Mitsugo Fuchida, who had led the air assault at Pearl Harbor, was among those eager to strike another trans-dominance. The periphery of U.S. fleet in the Pacific, the Japanese forces approached Midway with confidence, unaware of the intelligence breakthrough that had given the Americans a critical advantage. Far from the front lines, the quiet halls of Station Hypo in Pearl Harbor were alive with activity. Commander Joseph J. Rochefort, head of the cryptographic team, leaned over a desk covered with decoded Japanese messages. Weeks earlier, his team had uncovered a key piece of intelligence. Japan's target, codenamed AF, was Midway Atoll. To confirm their theory, Rochefort devised a clever ruse. A false message was sent from Midway reporting a water shortage, and soon after, Japanese transmissions referenced AF experiencing the same problem. The German casualty figures followed close behind, 200,000. This breakthrough electrified the intelligence community. For months, Rochefort's team had worked in near isolation, their work overshadowed by skepticism from some in Washington. Now, they had handed Nimitz a golden opportunity. With precise timing and positioning, the US could set an ambush for the Japanese fleet. Rochefort, a reserved man with an unassuming demeanor, brushed off accolades, focusing instead on refining the intelligence to give Nimitz every possible advantage. Admiral Nimitz acted swiftly, assembling a task force that included the carriers USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and USS Yorktown. The Yorktown, damaged during the Battle of the Coral Sea, was rushed back into service. Shipyard workers at Pearl Harbor labored around the clock, patching up the carrier in a miraculous 3 days. Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher labeled Constantine Maxwell's the first. Back in Tokyo, Japanese planners remained unaware that their codes had been compromised. Yamamoto and his officers believed they had the element of surprise. Their plan relied on the assumption that American carriers would only arrive after Midway was already under attack. This overconfidence would soon prove disastrous, as Rochefort's work had given Nimitz the ability to position his fleet for maximum impact. As the American fleet steamed toward Midway, the men aboard prepared for battle. On the Enterprise, sailors attended church services on deck, their faces a mix of solemnity and determination. Chaplains offered words of comfort, reminding the men of their duty and the cause for which they fought. For many, it was a moment of introspection, a chance to steel themselves for the chaos that lay ahead. Lieutenant Commander Clarence Wade McCluskey, the Enterprise Air Group commander, gathered his pilots for final briefings. McCluskey, a seasoned aviator with a calm yet commanding presence, emphasized the importance of teamwork and discipline. His words resonated with the men, who understood the critical role they would play in the coming days. Among them was Dick Best, whose sharp eyes scanned the maps and diagrams with unwavering focus. Best had no illusions about the dangers ahead, but resolved to give everything he had to the mission. On Midway Atoll itself, a small contingent of US Marines and Navy personnel braced for the Japanese onslaught. Commander Cyril Simard, in charge of the atoll's defenses, coordinated efforts to fortify the island. Pilots from Marine Air Group 22 prepared their planes, outdated Brewster Buffalo fighters and dauntless dive bombers, for the fight. Though outnumbered and outgunned, the men on Midway were determined to form a file on the jetty from the Marine Air Group 22. Across the ocean, the Japanese fleet sailed with precision. Aboard the Akagi, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo reviewed his orders. Nagumo, an experienced but cautious commander, was tasked with leading the carrier strike force. His subordinates, including Commander Minoru Genda, believed in the superiority of their training and tactics. As dawn approached, both sides moved closer to the decisive battle that would shape the conflict before it. The men stationed at Midway Atoll understood their precarious position. Commander Cyril Simard worked tirelessly to organize the defenses. Though the island's airstrip was a vital asset, its size and isolation made it vulnerable. Every man knew that Japan would strike with overwhelming force. Captain James A. Logan, a seasoned officer, took charge of fortifying the island. Under his guidance, Marines and sailors turned every resource into a weapon of defense, constructing gun emplacements, laying mines, and preparing anti-aircraft batteries. Marine pilots like Captain John F. Carey of Marine Fighting Squadron 2212 trained rigorously in their outdated Brewster Buffalo fighters. Carey, known for his unyielding determination, rallied his men with fiery speeches. They were fully aware of the technological gap between their planes and Japan's Zeros, but they were determined to hold their ground. For many of them had never faced combat before, but their camaraderie and sense of duty carried them forward. As the defenders worked, intelligence reports confirmed the scale of the approaching Japanese force. The atoll's radar system, a new and still developing technology, gave them a sliver of hope. If properly utilized, it could detect incoming aircraft early, providing precious minutes to mount a defense. In the Pacific, it was too important a mile to attack by force, though it could cost other lives in the Pacific. For the men on Midway, survival seemed improbable, yet none voiced their fears openly. Letters home were written hastily, many expressing love and final farewells. In their hearts, they hoped that their sacrifice would not be in vain. As night fell on the atoll, they watched the horizon with weary eyes. Knowing that the storm was coming, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo's task force cut through the Pacific with precision, its carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soyu, and Hiryu, leading the way. Nagumo, though experienced, was bound by the rigid doctrines of the Imperial Japanese Navy. His orders were clear: launch a devastating airstrike on Midway to pave the way for the invasion fleet. He carried with him the weight of Yamamoto's expectations and the memory of Japan, fostered by direct authority of his monarch from the victorious Japanese Navy. His orders were clear: launch a devastating airstrike on Midway to pave the way for the invasion fleet. He carried out by explosives two air tertiu, neonati, neoflux, must Commander Minoru Genda one of the architects of Japan's carrier strategies, worked closely with Nagumo. Genda's innovative ideas had been instrumental in the success of earlier campaigns, but he privately worried about the rigidity of Japan's tactics. While Genda pushed for flexibility, Nagumo adhered to the prescribed plan, unwilling to deviate unless absolutely necessary. Aboard the carriers, pilots prepared their aircraft for the assault. Lieutenant Yoichi Tomonaga, leading the strike group, was a highly skilled aviator. Despite his outward confidence, Tomonaga harbored concerns about the mission. His aircraft were heavily armed, but the long journey to Midway meant limited fuel, leaving little room for error. The pilots under his command were a mix of veterans and eager young men, all ready to prove their worth in battle. As the carriers approached their launch points, Nagumo reviewed his plans once more. The Japanese fleet was a formidable force, but the confidence of its leaders bordered on arrogance. Nagumo believed the Americans would be caught off guard, unaware that their movements were being tracked by the very enemy they sought to surprise. At dawn on June 3, 1942, the calm waters around Midway were broken by the droning hum of reconnaissance aircraft. Ensign Jack Reed, flying a PBY Catalina patrol plane, spotted the first signs of the Japanese invasion force. A fleet of transports and warships steaming toward the atoll as he transmitted the sighting report back to Midway. It was the first tangible proof that the enemy was near. Reports of invaders of the Philippines excited some skeptics and some psalmists, but caution was used to reverse the damage. At the airfield on Midway, Commander Simard ordered his men to prepare for immediate action. Army B-17 flying fortresses took to the skies, their heavy bomb loads aimed at striking the advancing fleet. Captain Logan coordinated the island's defences, ensuring that every anti-aircraft gun and coastal battery was ready to repel an air assault. Meanwhile, aboard the USS Enterprise, Admiral Spruance received the reconnaissance report with grim determination. The Japanese carriers remained undetected, but the sighting of the invasion fleet confirmed the battle was imminent. Spruance conferred with Rear Admiral Fletcher aboard the USS Yorktown, both agreeing to maintain their course and conserve their resources for the decisive moment. In the Japanese fleet, the initial sighting was met with skepticism. Nagumo dismissed the possibility of American carriers being nearby, relying on the belief that their superior strategy would keep them one step ahead. This miscalculation, rooted in overconfidence, would soon come to haunt the Japanese commanders. The US forces at Midway wasted no time in launching a counter-strike. Early on June 4, B-17 bombers, led by Lieutenant Colonel Walter C. Sweeney, flew toward the Japanese invasion fleet. The bombers released their payloads from high altitude, targeting transports and destroyers. Though the bombing runs were largely ineffective due to evasive maneuvers by the Japanese ships, the sight of American aircraft signaled to Nagumo that the defenders were prepared to fight. On the Japanese carriers, pilots scrambled to ready their planes for the initial assault on Midway. Lieutenant Tomonaga led the first wave, consisting of fighters, bombers, and torpedo planes. As they took off, the skies above the fleet buzzed with activity. The Japanese strike group headed toward Midway with precision, aiming to crush the island's defenses in one decisive blow. Back at Midway, radar operators detected the incoming wave of Japanese aircraft. Pilots of VMF 221, including Captain John Carey and Lieutenant George Cannon, took to the skies to intercept the attackers. The Brewster Buffaloes and Wildcat fighters of Midway's defenders were no match for the superior Japanese Zeros, but the Marines fought valiantly, determined to inflict as much damage as possible. Pilots of VMF 2. The first clash in the skies over Midway was brutal. Outnumbered and outgunned, the defenders suffered heavy losses. Carey's Buffalo was among those shot down, his courage in battle earning him posthumous recognition. Despite the odds, the defenders managed to disrupt the Japanese attack, forcing some bombers to miss their targets. The stage was now set for a larger confrontation that would decide the fate of the Pacific. At first light on June 4th, 1942, the Japanese attack on Midway Atoll began. Leading the airstrike was Lieutenant Joichi Tomonaga, who commanded a formation of bombers and fighter escorts. As they approached the island, the pilots were greeted by fierce anti-aircraft fire. The defenders on Midway, under Commander Cyril Simard direction, had prepared for this moment, and every gun on the atoll was trained skyward. Marine aviators from VMF 2121 scrambled to intercept the incoming wave. Second Lieutenant George Cannon, flying a Wildcat fighter, engaged the Japanese Zeros. Despite being outnumbered and outmatched, Cannon and his fellow Marines fought courageously, inflicting damage on the attackers. For many, it was their first, and for some, their last taste of combat. Cannon himself narrowly survived, his plane riddled with bullet holes as he crash-landed back on Midway runway. For many, it was their first, and for some, their last taste of combat. Cannon himself narrowly escaped being killed. The bombing was stellar. The Japanese bombers, despite facing intense resistance, managed to strike their targets. Explosions rocked the airstrip and fuel storage facilities, but the damage was not as severe as Tomonaga had hoped. As the strike force returned to their carriers, Tomonaga reported to Vice Admiral Nagana that a second wave would be necessary to neutralize Midway's defenses completely. Nauban was roused to bed by Bruno Docile as Tomonaga posed. As Tomonaga reported to Vice Admiral Tsunagama that a second wave would be necessary to neutralize the planes for another 7 days. After January, unbeknown to Nagumo, the American carriers were lurking nearby, ready to strike. Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance and Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, leading the American task forces, had kept their carriers hidden, waiting for the perfect opportunity. The defenders on Midway had bought precious time, and the tide of the battle was beginning to turn. Aboard the Japanese flagship Akagi, Vice Admiral Nagumo faced a critical decision. Reports of American aircraft carriers in the vicinity had reached him, creating a dilemma. Should he proceed with a second strike on Midway, or rearm his planes to prepare for an attack on the enemy fleet? Commander Nagumo's most trusted advisors advocated for caution. "Gona Minoru Genda," replied Commander Nagumo. "Ask the Somnia Stopcom for 3972 to replace inquiries from the 11th caste." "Minor Minoru Genda," replied Kame, protecting bushes with some anxiety. Genda rubbed his nails over his mouth to make signs and commit. Nagumo hesitated, torn between his orders to neutralize Midway and the emerging threat of the US fleet. His decision to delay rearming the aircraft created confusion among the crew. Below deck, sailors worked frantically to switch bomb loads, juggling the demands of a second Midway strike with preparations for a potential naval engagement. The tension aboard the Akagi was palpable as officers debated the best course of action. Meanwhile, reconnaissance aircraft launched by the Japanese fleet scoured the seas for signs of the American carriers. One pilot, Ensign Zenjiro Ono, finally sighted the US task force. His delayed report reached Nagumo just as the planes were being prepared for the second strike on Midway. The sighting confirmed the presence of the American fleet, and Nagumo ordered the planes to be rearmed once again. This costly delay would have devastating consequences. As chaos unfolded aboard the Akagi, the American task forces moved into position. Admiral Spruance, aboard the USS Enterprise, gave the order to launch a full-scale attack. Pilots and deck crews sprang into action, knowing this was their chance to deliver a decisive blow. The carriers Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown prepared their squadrons for what would become one of the most critical moments of the Pacific War. Lieutenant Commander Clarence Wade McCluskey, leading the Enterprise Air Group, had the unenviable task of finding the Japanese fleet in the vast expanse of the Pacific. Launching at first light, McCluskey and his squadrons of Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bombers climbed into the sky, navigating toward the reported position of the enemy. Time was critical, and fuel was limited, but McCluskey's sharp instincts would prove invaluable. As the American squadrons approached the area where the Japanese fleet was expected, McCluskey noticed a Japanese destroyer steaming at full speed. He deduced that it was returning to the main fleet and adjusted course accordingly. This decision led his group directly to the heart of Nagumo's carrier task force. The sight of the Japanese carrier, Soryu and Hiryu, spread out below was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. McCluskey quickly coordinated the attack. The Dauntless dive bombers peeled off in groups, each targeting a different carrier. Lieutenant Dick Best, commanding a section of bombers, focused his sights on the Akagi. With precision honed through countless training runs, Best released his bomb at the perfect moment. The weapon struck the Akagi's flight deck, igniting a catastrophic fire that spread through the ship. The simultaneous attacks on Kaga and Soryu were equally devastating. Bombs from McCluskey's group hit their marks, causing explosions that crippled the carriers. The Japanese fleet caught off guard and unprepared for such a rapid assault, was thrown into chaos. McCluskey and his pilots had turned the tide of the battle, but the cost was high. Many planes were lost to anti-aircraft fire and enemy fighters. Still, their bravery and skill ensured a pivotal victory for the US forces. As the bombs struck their targets, chaos engulfed the Japanese carriers. Aboard the Akagi, Vice Admiral Nagumo was stunned by the sudden ferocity of the American assault. The flagship's flight deck was consumed by flames, rendering it unusable. Below decks, sailors scrambled to contain the inferno, but the combination of aviation fuel, bombs and ordnance made their efforts futile. The Kaga faced a similar fate. Lieutenant Commander Shunzo Miwa, the ship's executive officer, took charge of damage control. Despite the crew's desperate attempts to extinguish the fires, secondary explosions erupted, spreading devastation throughout the carrier. Many of the crew were trapped below decks, their screams adding to the cacophony of destruction. Miwa himself was among the casualties, his bravery epitomizing the stoic resolve of the Japanese sailors. The Soryu, struck by multiple bombs, was a scene of utter devastation. Captain Ryu Sako Yanagimoto refused to abandon his ship, overseeing efforts to save as many men as possible. As the fires raged out of control, Yanagimoto ordered the crew to evacuate, but chose to remain aboard, going down with his vessel as it was consumed by the flames. His sacrifice was later honored as an example of ultimate loyalty and dedication. For the Japanese fleet, the loss of 3 carriers in such a short time was catastrophic. The Hiru, under the command of Rear Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi, was the only carrier still operational. Yamaguchi, determined to salvage the situation, began organizing a counter-strike. The battle was far from over, that the Japanese fleet had suffered a crippling blow that would shift the balance of power in the Pacific. Aboard the Hiru, Rear Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi remained calm despite the disaster unfolding around him. A respected leader, known for his courage and strategic insight, Yamaguchi resolved to retaliate. He ordered his remaining planes to launch a strike against the American carriers, hoping to inflict enough damage to even the odds as a member of the cabinet gone up. Aboard the Hiru, Rear Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi, Tomonaga, already wounded from the earlier attack on Midway, volunteered to lead the strike force. He understood the importance of the mission and was determined to succeed despite his injuries. As the Japanese planes took to the skies, the tension aboard the Hiryu was palpable. Yamaguchi watched his men depart, knowing the odds were stacked against them. The first wave of Hiru's strike group located the USS Yorktown. The carrier, still recovering from earlier damage, was a vulnerable target. Lieutenant Tomonaga led his bombers with precision, evading anti-aircraft fire to deliver a series of direct hits. The Yorktown slight deck erupted in flames. Despite their success, the Japanese strike group suffered heavy losses, with many planes suffering down during the attack. For Tomonaga, the mission ended in tragedy. His plane, damaged during the raid, ran out of fuel before he could return to the Hiryu. Refusing to bail out, he went down with his aircraft, a final act of loyalty to his nation and comrades. His sacrifice underscored the desperation of the Japanese effort and the human cost of the conflict. Aboard the USS Yorktown, Captain Elliot Buckmaster directed the firefighting efforts with remarkable composure. Despite the extensive damage from Hiryu's attack, the crew worked tirelessly to save the carrier. Buckmaster's leadership inspired the men, who refused to give up on their ship. Smoke billowed from the Yorktown, but hope remained that it could be salvaged. In the midst of the chaos, Damage Control Officer Lieutenant Commander Joseph C. Hinners led his team with determination. Their efforts managed to stabilize the fires, allowing some semblance of order to return to the ship. However, the reprieve was short-lived. A second wave of Japanese planes launched from the Hiru arrived to finish the job. This time, the attackers included torpedo bombers, which struck the Yorktown with devastating accuracy. The ship listed heavily to one side, its fate sealed. Buckmaster gave the order to abandon ship, prioritizing the safety of his crew. As the men boarded lifeboats, the carrier's proud legacy came to an end. For many of the sailors, the sight of their ship sinking into the Pacific was a moment of profound loss. Despite the Yorktown's destruction, its sacrifice was not in vain. The time it had bought allowed the American task force to mount a decisive counterstrike against the Hiryu, ensuring that the Japanese fleet would suffer a similar fate. The resilience of the Yorktown's crew served as a testament to the unyielding spirit of the U.S. Navy. The American counterstrike against the Hiryu was led by pilots from the USS Enterprise and USS Hornet. Among them was Lieutenant Richard Dick Best, whose earlier success in striking the Akagi had already made him a legend. Best and his squadron of dauntless dive bombers took to the skies once again, determined to eliminate the last operational Japanese carrier. As they approached the Hiru, the American pilots faced intense anti-aircraft fire. Best, leading the charge, maintained his focus, diving toward the carrier at a steep angle. His bomb struck the Hiru squarely on the flight deck, igniting a massive explosion. Additional hits from other bombers ensure that the carrier's fate, as its crew struggled to abandon it. Rear Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi, refusing to leave his command, chose to remain aboard the sinking Yiru. Alongside Captain Tomeo Kaku, Yamaguchi exemplified the Japanese ethos of self-sacrifice. His decision to go down with the carrier was both a personal act of loyalty and a symbolic gesture of defiance in the face of defeat. With the destruction of the Hiryu, the Battle of Midway reached its turning point. The Japanese fleet, now without air cover, began its retreat. For the American forces, the victory was a hard-fought triumph, achieved through courage, ingenuity, and sacrifice. However, the cost of the battle, measured in lives lost and ships sunk, was a stark reminder of war. With their carriers destroyed, Admiral Izoroku Yamamoto and the remaining Japanese forces faced a grim reality. Yamamoto, aboard the battleship Yamato, had initially planned to lure the US fleet into a decisive surface engagement. However, the catastrophic loss of 4 carriers made this strategy untenable. The Japanese fleet began to retreat under the cover of darkness, leaving behind the burning wreckage of their once proud task force. Rear Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi's decision to go down with the Hiru weighed heavily on the surviving Japanese sailors. Commander Kaku Harada aboard the cruiser Tone reflected on the loss of his colleagues and the failure of the Midway operation. Harada, a veteran of the Pearl Harbor attack, had shifted irreversibly. For the American forces, the victory at Midway was cause for celebration, but there was no time for complacency. Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, now in command of the U.S. task force, ordered his ships to maintain vigilance as they pursued the retreating Japanese fleet. Spruance's cautious approach, though criticized by some, ensured that the U.S. forces avoided unnecessary risks. Meanwhile, survivors from the Japanese carriers were plucked from the sea by both American and Japanese vessels. Among them was Lieutenant Commander Shigekazu Shimazaki, who had led one of the early airstrikes on Midway. Shimazaki's capture provided U.S. intelligence with valuable insights into the Pacific War. As the Japanese fleet retreated, the crews of the crippled carriers Kaga and Soryu fought to save their ships. Captain Jisaku Okada of the Kaga displayed unwavering resolve as he directed damage control efforts. Despite their best efforts, the fires aboard the Kaga continued to rage, fed by fuel and ammunition. By late afternoon, it was clear that the ship could not be saved. Okada ordered the crew to abandon ship. Many sailors hesitated, reluctant to leave the vessel that had been their home for years. As lifeboats were launched, Okada remained aboard, ensuring that every man who could be saved was evacuated. Finally, he saluted the flag one last time before the Kaga was scuttled by Japanese destroyers. The Soru faced a similar fate. Captain Ryusaku Yanagamoto had already perished during the initial strikes, leaving Lieutenant Commander Masayuki Ueno to oversee the evacuation. Ueno, a seasoned officer, worked tirelessly to organize the rescue of his crew. However, the intense heat and smoke made the task nearly impossible. The Soru was eventually abandoned and sunk by Japanese forces to prevent its capture. The loss of these carriers marked the end of an era for the Imperial Japanese Navy. Once symbols of Japan's naval dominance, they now rested at the bottom of the Pacific, stark reminders of the price of overconfidence and the resilience of their adversaries. For the survivors of the sunken carriers, the ordeal was far from over. Hundreds of sailors from the Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu found themselves adrift in the Pacific, clinging to debris or crowded onto lifeboats. Many were injured, suffering from burns, fractures, and dehydration. The few Japanese destroyers that could provide assistance were overwhelmed by the sheer number of survivors. For years, since the Second World War, the purpose forced by explosions from boats, hydro flashes, the sunsets and snows and more. The few people clinging to the lifeboats, including Stir, the rainforest, Phoeben Yevon, and Council Island. Lieutenant Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who had led the attack on Pearl Harbor, was among those rescued. Though not directly involved in the Midway battle, Fuchida's perspective as a key strategist offered a sobering assessment of the operation's failure. As he recovered aboard the destroyer Makigumo, Fuchida began to question the decisions that had led to this devastating defeat. For the Americans, the rescue of downed pilots and sailors was equally harrowing. Lieutenant Junior Grade Norman Dusty Kleiss, a dauntless dive bomber pilot who had scored a direct hit on the Kaga, was among those who returned to his carrier after enduring heavy anti-aircraft fire and fuel shortages. His story became an inspiration for his fellow aviators, highlighting the courage and skill required to turn the tide of battle. As the survivors recounted their experiences, a common theme emerged: the brutal, unrelenting nature of war. For both sides, the Battle of Midway was a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict and the sacrifices made in the name of victory. The tragedy. Aboard the Yamato, Admiral Yamamoto received the grim report from his commanders. The loss of 4 carriers, hundreds of aircraft, and thousands of sailors was a devastating blow to Japan's naval power. Yamamoto, a strategic thinker who had warned against underestimating American resolve, now faced the consequences of his nation's ambitions. Yamamoto's personal staff, including Captain Kuroshima Kameto, attempted to console the admiral. Kuroshima, known for his eccentricity and loyalty, emphasized the resilience of the Japanese spirit and the need to adapt to the changing tides of war. However, Yamamoto remained somber, recognizing that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. As the Japanese fleet regrouped, Yamamoto began drafting plans for future operations. He knew that the war was far from over, and Japan still possessed formidable resources. However, the loss of experienced pilots and irreplaceable carriers made the task of regaining the initiative increasingly difficult. The Battle of Midway, Yamamoto realized, was more than a tactical defeat. It was a turning point in the Pacific War. For the first time, the Imperial Japanese Navy had been decisively beaten, and the Americans had demonstrated their ability to strike back with precision and determination. Yamamoto's reflections would shape the long struggle ahead. Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance stood on the bridge of the USS Enterprise, his sharp gaze fixed on the horizon. While his cautious strategy had been criticized by some, it had proven instrumental in securing victory. Spruance's calm demeanor masked the immense responsibility he bore. As the Japanese fleet retreated, he ensured that the American task force remained ready for any potential counterattack. Spruance worked closely with Captain George Murray, commander of the Enterprise. Murray, a seasoned officer, admired Spruance's leadership. Together, they reviewed reports from the battle, noting the extraordinary courage displayed by the air crews. Men like Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey and Lieutenant Richard Dick Best had played pivotal roles, their actions decisively altering the course of the conflict. Meanwhile, Spruance received updates on the condition of the USS Yorktown. Although abandoned, the carrier was still afloat, a testament to the skill and resilience of her crew. Salvage efforts were underway, but the damage was extensive, and the threat of submarine attacks made the operation perilous. Spruance recognized the importance of preserving what remained of the Yorktown, symbolizing the sacrifices made during the battle. For Spruance, the victory at Midway was a moment of pride, tempered by the loss of lives. He understood that this was only the beginning of a long and arduous campaign. The Admiral's quiet resolve became a defining characteristic, earning him the respect of his men and a lasting place in the annals of naval history. As salvage teams worked to stabilize the USS Yorktown, lurking danger threatened to undermine their efforts. The Japanese submarine I-10628, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Yahachi Tanabe, had been dispatched to hunt for crippled American ships. Tanabe, a methodical and determined officer, had been tracking the Yorktown's position for days. On June 6, 1942, I-1168 struck. The submarine launched a spread of torpedoes, 2 of which struck the already damaged carrier. A third torpedo hit the destroyer USS Hammond, which had been assisting the Yorktown. The Hammond sank quickly, her crew scrambling to safety in the chaotic aftermath. Explosions from the Hammond's depth charges claimed additional lives, compounding the tragedy. Aboard the Yorktown, salvage officer Lieutenant Commander Arnold True and his team fought valiantly to save the ship. However, the damage was too severe. Captain Elliot Buckmaster, who had overseen the Yorktown's heroic participation in the battle, made the heartbreaking decision to abandon her for the final time. On June 7, the Yorktown slipped beneath the waves, taking with her the memories of a hard-fought victory. For the survivors, the loss of the Yorktown was deeply personal. Sailors like gunner's mate 3rd Class Robert Bass, who had served aboard the carrier since her commissioning, struggled to process the loss of their home at sea. Yet, their courage and resilience remained unshaken, embodying the spirit of the US Navy. In the days following the battle, Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey took time to reflect on the events that had unfolded. As the Air Group Commander aboard the Enterprise, McCluskey's role in locating and attacking the Japanese fleet had been pivotal. His decision to press on despite dwindling fuel reserves had led directly to the discovery of the enemy carriers. McCluskey gathered with his fellow pilots, including Lieutenant Richard Best and Ensign George Gay, to recount their experiences. The camaraderie among the air crews was palpable, forged in the crucible of combat. They spoke of the daring dives, the intense anti-aircraft fire, and the devastating explosions that had marked the battle. For many, the memory of their fallen comrades weighed heavily, a reminder of the cost of victory. As McCluskey reviewed the battle reports, he recognized the extraordinary teamwork that had led to success. From the intelligence officers who deciphered Japanese codes to the mechanics who kept the planes operational, every individual had played a critical role. McCluskey's leadership had been instrumental, but he was quick to share credit with the entire task force. For McCluskey, the Battle of Midway was more than a military triumph. It was a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of the American forces. He resolved to honor the sacrifices of his comrades by continuing the fight, knowing that the road to victory would be long and arduous. In the aftermath of the battle, recognition grew for the unsung heroes of Midway, the Codebreakers. Led by Commander Joseph Rochefort, the team at Station Hypo in Pearl Harbor had played a critical role in uncovering the Japanese plan. Rochefort, known for his eccentric personality and tireless work ethic, had spent countless hours deciphering intercepted messages, providing the interactive messages that had enabled the American ambush. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, personally commended Rochefort and his team for their efforts. Nimitz understood the significance of their achievement, noting that the victory at Midway would not have been possible without their insights. Despite this recognition, Rochefort remained humble, emphasizing the collective effort of the intelligence community. For Lieutenant Jasper Holmes, another member of the Station Hypo team, the success at Midway was a validation of their work. Holmes, a former Hollywood screenwriter turned naval officer, had contributed to the ingenious ruse of planting false information about Midway's water supply to confirm the target of the Japanese attack. The success of this ploy underscored the importance of creativity and adaptability in wartime intelligence. The triumph of the Codebreakers highlighted a new dimension of warfare, the battle for information. Their work had given the US Navy a critical edge, turning the tide of the war in the Pacific. As the team celebrated their victory, they knew that their efforts would continue to shape the course of history. Ensign George Gay, the sole survivor of Torpedo Squadron 8, drifted in the open sea, hidden beneath his inflatable seat cushion. The aftermath of the devastating attack on the Japanese fleet had left him battered and alone. He had witnessed the annihilation of his squadron during their daring but doomed assault, as they drew the enemy's attention and suffered catastrophic losses. As night fell, Gay clung to his cushion, his body aching and his throat dry from the salt water. The sea around him carried the faint smell of oil and smoke, reminders of the carnage he had escaped. He dared not move, for fear of being spotted by Japanese destroyers that prowled nearby. Despite the danger, his spirits were buoyed by the knowledge that his comrades' sacrifice had contributed to the victory. By the next morning, Gay was weak but determined. A passing patrol plane spotted him and signaled his location to a US rescue vessel. Pulled aboard, he recounted his harrowing experience to his rescuers, his account filled with admiration for the bravery of his fallen squadron mates. For Gay, survival was bittersweet. Though he was hailed as a hero, the memories of his comrades haunted him. Their courage and sacrifice remained etched in his mind, driving him to honor their legacy as he continued to serve in the Pacific Theater. Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, commander of Task Force 17, bore the weight of Midway's outcome heavily on his shoulders. The decision to launch the Yorktown's air groups in the face of overwhelming odds had been a calculated risk, one that paid off, but at great cost. Fletcher, aboard the heavy cruiser USS Astoria after the loss of the Yorktown, spent hours reviewing the battle's events. Fletcher's actions had been critical in coordinating the American response to the Japanese offensive. His cautious yet decisive leadership had ensured that the US forces could strike effectively without overextending themselves. Despite his role in the victory, Fletcher faced criticism from some quarters for not pursuing the retreating Japanese fleet more aggressively. For Fletcher's staff, including Commander Carl Moore, the focus was on supporting their admiral. Moore had worked closely with Fletcher throughout the battle, providing valuable insights and logistical expertise. The camaraderie among Fletcher's team reflected the broader unity of the task force, which had been essential to their success. As Fletcher prepared his after-action report, he emphasized the importance of recognizing the contributions of every individual, from the pilots who delivered the decisive blows to the sailors who kept the ships operational. His legacy at Midway would be one of steady leadership and a commitment to his men, values that would define his naval career. Lieutenant Richard Stick Best, whose precision bombing had played a key role in the destruction of the Japanese carriers Akagi and Hiryu, returned to the U.S. Enterprise, physically and emotionally exhausted. The relentless pace of the battle had tested his skills and endurance, but his actions had been instrumental in turning the tide of the war. Best's final sortie during the Battle of Midway was etched in his memory. Leading his squadron of dauntless dive bombers, he had braved intense anti-aircraft fire to deliver a crippling blow to the Hiryu. The sight of his bomb striking the carrier's flight deck, igniting a catastrophic fire, was both a source of pride and a somber reminder of the deadly stakes of their mission. Back aboard the Enterprise, Best's health began to deteriorate. The prolonged exposure to oxygen at high altitudes, combined with the stress of combat, had exacerbated an underlying condition. Diagnosed with tuberculosis, he was evacuated for treatment, bringing his combat career to an abrupt end. For Best, the Battle of Midway marked both the pinnacle and conclusion of his service. Though his time in the war was cut short, his contributions were celebrated as an example of courage and professionalism. His actions at Midway would inspire generations of naval aviators, solidifying his place in history. For Japanese aviators who survived the Battle of Midway, the aftermath was a time of reflection and grief. Men like Lieutenant Joichi Tomonaga, who had led the Hiru's airstrikes on the Yorktown, struggled to come to terms with the scale of the defeat. Tomonaga, fatally injured during the attack, became a symbol of the bravery and sacrifice of Japan's airmen. Among the survivors was Lieutenant Shunichi Kudo, a pilot from the Kaga's air group. Kudo who had narrowly escaped his sinking carrier, recounted the fierce determination of his comrades during the battle. He described the chaotic scenes on the flight decks as bombs rained down, and the desperate efforts to launch counterattacks in the face of overwhelming odds. The loss of experienced pilots like Tomonaga and the destruction of so many aircraft dealt a severe blow to the Imperial Japanese Navy's air power. The surviving pilots were acutely aware of the challenges that lay ahead, as the loss of carriers and air crews created a void that would be difficult to fill. For Kudo and his fellow aviators, the Battle of Midway was a turning point in their lives. The defeat shattered their confidence in Japan's invincibility, forcing them to confront the harsh realities of war. Their stories, preserved in letters and memoirs, provide a poignant insight into the human cost of the conflict. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who had led the attack on Pearl Harbor 6 months earlier, was not present at the Battle of Midway due to injuries sustained at Coral Sea. However, Fuchida's insights into the battle's failures became a crucial part of the post-battle evaluations conducted by the Japanese High Command. His analysis reflected his deep understanding of air warfare and the strategic missteps that had led to disaster. Fuchida received reports of the battle's aftermath while recuperating in Japan. The destruction of 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiru, left him dismayed. He recognized that the loss of these ships, along with their seasoned air crews, marked a critical turning point in the war. Fuchida noted that the failure to maintain proper reconnaissance and the overconfidence in their earlier successes had doomed the Japanese plan. In conversations with Admiral Yamamoto and other senior officers, Fuchida urged a reassessment of Japan's strategic approach to the war. He emphasized the importance of adapting to the changing dynamics of naval warfare, particularly the decisive role of carrier-based air power. His recommendations, however, were overshadowed by the growing pressures of the conflict and the Japanese military's reluctance to acknowledge the full extent of the defeat. Fuchida's reflections on Midway, documented in his post-war writings, offer a compelling perspective on the battle. His candid assessment of Japan's shortcomings provides valuable insights into the challenges faced by the Imperial Navy as it grappled with the realities of modern warfare. For the men of the Japanese carrier Kaga, survival in the aftermath of the ship's destruction was a harrowing ordeal. Sailors like Petty Officer Yoshio Ochi found themselves adrift in the Pacific, clinging to debris as the carrier burned and sank beneath the waves. The shock of the attack, combined with the chaos of the evacuation, left many struggling to comprehend the scale of the disaster. Japanese destroyers rushed to rescue survivors, maneuvering through the debris-strewn waters while remaining vigilant for enemy aircraft. Lieutenant Commander Tamotsu Uishi, captain of the destroyer Hagikaze, personally oversaw the rescue efforts, ensuring that as many lives as possible were lost, their names etched into the tragic legacy of the battle. Among the survivors, stories of camaraderie and resilience emerged. Ochi recounted how he and several crewmates had supported each other in the water, sharing what little they had to stay afloat. Their determination to survive mirrored the face of overwhelming adversity. The rescue of Kaga's survivors highlighted the human cost of the battle. For those who lived, the memories of that day remained vivid, a testament to their endurance and the sacrifices of their fallen comrades. In the dimly lit rooms of Station Hypo at Pearl Harbor, Commander Joseph Rochefort and his team of cryptanalysts received news of the victory at Midway. Rochefort, whose tireless work had been instrumental in uncovering Japan's plans, felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The success validated months of intense effort and reinforced the critical role of intelligence in modern warfare. Rochefort, however, remained characteristically modest. He deflected praise, emphasizing the collective nature of the achievement. His team, which included brilliant minds like Jasper Holmes and Lieutenant Thomas Dyer, had worked around the clock to piece together the fragmented intercepts that revealed Japan's intentions. Their innovative methods, including the famous RF water ruse, had proven decisive. Despite the victory, Rochefort faced bureaucratic challenges. His unorthodox approach and disregard for naval protocol had drawn criticism from some higher-ups. Yet, Admiral Chester Nimitz recognized the value of Rochefort's work and ensured that the cryptanalysts received the recognition they deserved. For Rochefort, the Battle of Midway was both a professional triumph and a personal vindication. His contributions had not only changed the course of the war, but also underscored the importance of innovation and persistence in the face of adversity. Lieutenant Commander Joichi Tomonaga of the Japanese carrier Hiryu had a reputation as a skilled and dedicated aviator. At Midway, Tomonaga led a determined counterattack against the American fleet. Despite flying a damaged aircraft and knowing the odds were against him, he exemplified the fierce determination of Japan's airmen. Tomonaga's final mission came after Hiryu's leadership decided to strike the USS Yorktown in retaliation for the destruction of their sister carriers. As he climbed into the cockpit, Tomonaga knew the mission would likely be his last. The strain of battle and the knowledge of the growing losses weighed heavily on him. But he pushed these thoughts aside, focusing on his duty. Leading a formation of torpedo bombers, Tomonaga guided his squadron through relentless anti-aircraft fire. His leadership inspired his men, many of whom followed him despite the near-certain danger. Tomonaga's torpedo found its mark, contributing to the crippling damage sustained by the Yorktown. Tomonaga did not survive the mission. His death was mourned by his comrades, who regarded him as a model of bravery and sacrifice. For the Japanese Navy, Tomonaga's actions symbolized the determination and resilience of their forces, even as the tide of the war began to turn against them. Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding Task Force 16 after Admiral Halsey fell ill, had a pivotal role in the Battle of Midway. Known for his calm demeanor and analytical mind, Spruance faced the immense challenge of making swift, high-stakes decisions in the chaos of naval warfare. Spruance's leadership was marked by calculated risks. He had chosen to launch his air groups early, despite concerns about terrain field range and the lack of precise intelligence on the Japanese fleet's location. His reasoning was simple yet profound. Delay could mean missing the fleeting opportunity to strike the enemy when they were most vulnerable. As reports of success came in, the destruction of the Akagi, Kaga and Soryu, Spruance maintained his characteristic composure. He understood that while the immediate threat was diminished, the battle was far from over. The here-used counterattack on the Yorktown reinforced the need for vigilance, and Spruance ensured that his forces remained prepared for further engagements. Spruance's decisions at Midway exemplified a balance of boldness and restraint. His ability to adapt to rapidly changing circumstances and prioritized the broader strategic picture made him a key figure in the victory. For his peers and subordinates, Spruance's quiet confidence was a source of inspiration, underscoring the importance of leadership in the face of uncertainty. In the radio room of the USS Yorktown, Chief Radioman Thomas Marr worked tirelessly to maintain communication between the carrier and the rest of the task force. Amid the chaos of battle, Marr's role was vital. The accurate transmission of orders and intelligence was critical to coordinate the American response to the Japanese threat. Marr and his team operated under intense conditions. As Japanese bombers targeted the Yorktown, the ship shook from the impact of near misses and direct hits. Despite the physical danger, Marr remained focused on the status of the air groups. When the Yorktown was struck by torpedoes and began to list, Marr coordinated the evacuation efforts through the ship's communications systems. His calm and authoritative voice reassured crew members as they abandoned ship, ensuring that the evacuation proceeded as smoothly as possible. Marr's dedication reflected the professionalism of the Yorktown's crew. Even as the ship sank, their efforts exemplified the resilience and teamwork that characterized the American forces at Midway. For Marr, the battle was a testament to the importance of every role, no matter how behind the scenes it might seem. Lieutenant Commander Clarence McCluskey, leading the Enterprise's air group, played a decisive role in the destruction of the Japanese carriers. His discovery of the enemy fleet after an exhaustive search changed the course of the battle. McCluskey's decision to continue the search, despite dwindling fuel reserves, showcased his determination and intuition. When McCluskey spotted the Japanese fleet, he immediately ordered his dive bombers to attack. The planes of Bombing Squadron 6, VB-6, and Scouting Squadron 6, VS-6, descended in unison, their bombs finding their marks on the Kaga and Akagi. The ensuing explosions and fires devastated the Japanese fleet, marking a turning point in the battle. McCluskey's leadership during the attack was instrumental. His calm and decisive actions inspired his men, many of whom faced overwhelming anti-aircraft fire with unwavering resolve. For McCluskey, the success of the mission was a testament to the skill and bravery of his pilots and crew. After the battle, McCluskey reflected on the high cost of victory. The loss of friends and comrades weighed heavily on him, but he found solace in knowing that their sacrifices had contributed to a crucial victory. McCluskey's actions at Midway earned him the Navy Cross, a recognition of his courage and leadership. Petty Officer Propokeam, a crewman aboard the carrier Akagi, experienced the horrors of Midway firsthand. When the American dive bombers descended on the Akagi, Koyama was stationed below deck, working to maintain the ship's operations. The sudden explosion of bombs and the spreading fires trapped many of the crew in the lower compartments. Koyama's efforts to assist his fellow sailors were heroic. He worked tirelessly to help injured crew members reach safety, even as the ship's conditions deteriorated. The thick smoke and intense heat made survival increasingly unlikely. Yet Koyama refused to abandon his post. As the Akagi's fate became clear, Captain Kiichi Hasegawa ordered the crew to abandon ship. Koyama was one of the last to leave, ensuring that as many of his comrades as possible escaped. He was eventually rescued by a Japanese destroyer, though the loss of the Akagi weighed heavily on him. Koyama and the surviving crew, the battle was a sobering reminder of the costs of war. Their resilience in the face of adversity was a testament to the human spirit, even amid the devastation of one of history's most pivotal naval battles. Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, commander of the Japanese carrier strike force, faced immense pressure during the Battle of Midway. After the American air attacks inflicted heavy damage on his fleet, Nagumo grappled with the realization that Japan's offensive momentum had been shattered. His decision-making under such conditions would later become a subject of intense scrutiny. As the American dive bombers descended on the Kaga, Akagi, and Soryu, Nagumo remained on the flagship Akagi, overseeing operations. The destruction of 3 carriers within minutes left him visibly shaken, yet he tried to maintain his composure, to rally the remnants of his forces. Nagumo directed Hiryu to launch a retaliatory strike, knowing it was Japan's last hope to salvage the battle. Despite his efforts, the counterattack was insufficient to turn the tide. The Hiru itself became a target, falling victim to relentless American dive bombers. With his fleet effectively neutralized, Nagumo ordered a retreat, realizing that the once dominant Japanese carrier force had been decimated. For Nagumo, the Battle of Midway was a devastating blow to his career and Japan's strategic ambitions. The loss of the carriers, along with their irreplaceable air crews, marked a turning point in the Pacific War. Nagumo's role in the battle remains a tragic reminder of the immense pressures faced by commanders in the crucible of war. Captain Miles Browning, serving as Admiral Spruance's Chief of Staff, played a crucial role in shaping the American strategy during the battle. Known for his sharp mind and assertive personality, Browning was instrumental in planning the airstrikes that decimated the Japanese fleet. Browning advocated for an aggressive approach, pushing for an early launch of the carrier air groups to catch the Japanese by surprise. His insistence on prioritizing speed over precise positioning proved decisive, as the American dive bombers arrived just as the Japanese carriers were refueling and rearming their planes. Throughout the battle, Browning worked closely with Spruance, analyzing intelligence and adapting plans to the evolving situation. His ability to think quickly and anticipate the enemy's moves contributed significantly to the American victory. Despite his sometimes abrasive demeanor, Browning earned the respect of his peers for his tactical acumen. After the battle, Browning reflected on the significance of the victory. He understood that Midway was not just a tactical triumph, but a turning point in the war, demonstrating the effectiveness of carrier-based warfare and the resilience of the US Navy. Ensign Wesley Osmus, a young pilot from the USS Yorktown, was captured by Japanese forces after his plane was shot down during the battle. His capture marked one of the rare instances of American personnel falling into Japanese hands during the engagement. Osmus was interrogated aboard a Japanese destroyer, where he steadfastly refused to divulge any critical information. Despite the intense pressure and threats from his captors, he maintained his composure and loyalty to his country. His resistance reflected the bravery and resolve of the American servicemen who fought at Midway. Osmus was interrogated aboard a Japanese serviceman who fought at Midway. Tragically, Osmus was executed by his captors, a grim reminder of the brutality of war. News of his fate would not reach his comrades until after the war, but his sacrifice became a symbol of the courage and determination that defined the battle. Osmus's story underscores the human cost of Midway. While the battle was a strategic victory for the United States, it came with profound sacrifices, each one a testament to the bravery of those who served. The Hiru, the last operational Japanese carrier at Midway, fought valiantly to turn the tide of the battle. Under the command of Captain Tomeo Kaku and Rear Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi, the ship launched a series of counterattacks against the American fleet. Hiryu's air groups managed to inflict critical damage on the USS Yorktown, showcasing the skill and determination of its pilots. However, the reprieve was short-lived. American dive bombers from the Enterprise and Hornet soon located the Hiryu and unleashed a devastating assault. As the bombs struck, fires engulfed the carrier, and its crew scrambled to contain the damage. Captain Kaku and Admiral Yamaguchi, recognizing the futility of the situation, chose to remain aboard the sinking ship. Their decision reflected the traditional code of honor that governed Japanese naval officers, prioritizing duty and sacrifice over personal survival. The loss of the Hiryu marked the end of Japan's offensive capabilities at Midway. For the Americans, it was a hard-fought victory. For the Japanese, it was a sobering defeat that would reshape their approach to the war. Lieutenant George Gay, a pilot in Torpedo Squadron 8 from the USS Hornet, became a central figure in one of the most harrowing moments of the Battle of Midway. As VT-8 launched its attack on the Japanese carriers, the squadron faced overwhelming enemy defenses. With no fighter escort and relentless attacks from Japanese Zero fighters, Gay and his squadron pressed on with remarkable courage, knowing their chances of survival were slim. One by one, his fellow pilots were shot down, their planes crashing into the sea. Gay himself was hit, and his Devastator torpedo bomber spiraled out of control. He managed to escape his sinking aircraft, clutching onto a seat cushion for buoyancy. As the battle raged on around him, Gay floated in the Pacific, bearing witness to the pivotal American dive bomber attacks that crippled the Japanese carriers. Hiding beneath the waves to avoid detection by Japanese ships, he spent over 30 hours in the water before being rescued by a PBY Catalina flying boat. Gay's survival and first-hand account of the battle became an iconic story of resilience and bravery. Despite the loss of his entire squadron, his observations of the Japanese fleet's movements provided valuable insights to the American commanders. Rear Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi, commander of the Japanese carrier Hiru, embodied the traditional Bushido spirit in his final moments at Midway. A decorated officer with a reputation for tactical brilliance, Yamaguchi faced an impossible situation as the Hiru succumbed to relentless American bombing. Despite the catastrophic damage, Yamaguchi remained composed, directing his remaining forces to inflict as much damage as possible on the enemy. When it became clear that the Hiru could no longer be saved, Yamaguchi declined offers to abandon ship, choosing instead to share its fate. As the flames consumed the carrier, Yamaguchi expressed his gratitude to the crew for their bravery and dedication. His decision to stay aboard alongside Captain Tomeo Kaku was both a personal and symbolic gesture, reflecting his unwavering commitment to duty and honor. For the Japanese Navy, Yamaguchi's loss was profound. He was regarded as one of their most capable leaders, and his death symbolized the heavy price of the battle. Among his peers, Yamaguchi's actions were remembered as a poignant reminder of the sacrifices demanded by war. Commander John Waldron, the leader of Torpedo Squadron 8 aboard the USS Hornet, played a key role in one of the most courageous yet tragic episodes of the Battle of Midway. Waldron was determined to locate and attack the Japanese fleet, even if it meant deviating from the planned course. As VT-8 flew toward the enemy, Waldron's leadership was evident in his unwavering determination. The attack was met with devastating resistance. Japanese Zeros swarmed the slow-moving torpedo bombers, and anti-aircraft fire filled the sky. Waldron's plane was among the first to be shot down, and he perished along with his crew. None of VT-8's planes managed to land a hit, and all but one pilot, George Gay, were lost. Despite the heavy losses, Waldron's actions exemplified the courage and sacrifice that characterized the Battle of Midway. His squadron's diversionary attack paved the way for the subsequent dive bomber assault, which would ultimately turn the tide of the battle. Ensign Jack Powers, a pilot in Bombing Squadron 6, VB-6, from the USS Enterprise, was a key participant in the attack on the Japanese carriers. Powers was part of the group of dive bombers that struck the Kaga, delivering a critical blow to the Japanese fleet. As Powers began his dive, he faced intense anti-aircraft fire and the looming threat of Zero fighters. Undeterred, he maintained his focus, guiding his SBD Dauntless dive bomber toward its target. His precision bombing helped ignite fires that would consume the Kagia. Number 4A 3040. Powers' courage under fire inspired his fellow pilots, many of whom faced similar dangers during the attack. His actions demonstrated the importance of teamwork and individual bravery in the success of the mission. For Powers, the battle was a defining moment in his military career. Though he survived the engagement, the memories of the chaos and loss stayed with him, a reminder of the sacrifices required to achieve victory. The Battle of Midway marked a decisive turning point in the Pacific War. The American forces had achieved an astounding victory, sinking 4 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, and destroying hundreds of aircraft. However, the cost was high. The USS Yorktown was lost, along with over 300 American lives. For Japan, the loss was catastrophic. The carriers destroyed at Midway had been the backbone of their naval power, and the experienced pilots who perished were irreplaceable. The Imperial Navy's aura of invincibility was shattered, and the balance of power in the Pacific shifted irreversibly. Admiral Yamamoto, who had masterminded the attack on Pearl Harbor, was forced to retreat, his plans for further offensives in the Pacific undone. Back in the United States, the victory at Midway provided a much-needed morale boost. Newspapers celebrated the courage and sacrifice of the sailors and airmen, and the battle's outcome strengthened public resolve for the long and grueling fight ahead. The survivors of the battle, both American and Japanese, carried the scars of Midway for the rest of their lives. For some, it was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. For others, a grim reminder of war's unforgiving nature. In the weeks following the battle, the American Navy worked tirelessly to consolidate its gains and prepare for the next phase of the war. New carriers, such as the Essex class, were already under construction, while advancements and tactics and technology sought to address the shortcomings revealed at Midway. For many of the men who fought, the aftermath brought a mix of relief and grief. Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance and Vice Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher reflected on the sacrifices made by their crews. Despite their leadership and strategic successes, the weight of the lives lost hung heavily on their shoulders. Lieutenant Commander George Gay, the sole survivor of Torpedo Squadron 8, became a symbol of endurance. His first-hand accounts of the battle were used to inform future training and strategy, ensuring that the lessons of Midway were not forgotten. On the Japanese side, the loss of 4 carriers prompted a shift in naval doctrine. The emphasis on battleships waned as the importance of aircraft carriers became undeniable. However, Japan's ability to replace the carriers and pilots lost at Midway was severely hampered by its industrial limitations, setting the stage for future defeats. The Battle of Midway was not just a strategic victory, it was a story of immense human sacrifice. Sailors and pilots from both sides faced unimaginable odds, displaying courage and resilience in the face of death. Families back home received telegrams bearing the grim news of loved ones lost. In small towns across America, the names of young men who had perished at Midway were added to memorial plaques. For Japanese families, the losses were no less profound, though the government's strict censorship meant many never knew the full extent of the disaster. Amid the grief, the survivors carried forward the memories of their comrades. Pilots like Ensign Dusty Clyce and Commander Wade McCluskey, who had delivered critical blows to the Japanese carriers, became heroes, their stories inspiring future generations of naval aviators. The battle also underscored the importance of intelligence and preparation. Men like Commander Joseph Rochefort, who had cracked the Japanese codes, were belatedly recognized for their contributions, proving that wars are won not just on the battlefield, but also through strategy and foresight. The Battle of Midway was more than just a clash of ships and planes. It was a defining moment in the history of World War II. It demonstrated the value of courage, sacrifice, and ingenuity, and it marked the beginning of Japan's long retreat in the Pacific. For the men who fought, the battle's legacy was deeply personal. Many struggled with the trauma of war, while others found solace in the camaraderie they had shared. The lessons of Midway informed naval strategy for decades, shaping the conduct of future conflicts. Today, the Battle of Midway is remembered as one of the greatest naval victories in history. Memorials and museums honor the sacrifices made, ensuring that the stories of those who served are never forgotten. From the pilots who braved enemy fire to the codebreakers who unraveled Japan's plans, every contribution mattered. As the years passed, the survivors of Midway grew fewer, but their legacy endured. The battle stood as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of unity in the face of adversity. Midway was not just a victory, it was a turning point that shaped the course of history and reaffirmed the enduring strength of those who fight for freedom. The Tuskegee airfield in Alabama buzzed with the energy of young men preparing for war. Cadets, both nervous and excited, moved briskly across the field, checking their aircraft and reviewing flight plans. Among them was Captain Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., a calm and resolute figure. Davis, one of the first African-American officers to command a fighter squadron, knew the significance of their mission. This wasn't just about proving their skills as pilots. It was about breaking racial barriers and fighting for equality. Nearby, Lieutenant Charles Buster Hall finished his pre-flight checks. Hall, a sharecropper's son from North Carolina, had always dreamed of flying. His journey to Tuskegee had been fraught with obstacles, but he had overcome them all with determination and grit. Now, as he stood beside his P-51 Mustang, he felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the airfield, Major George S. Spanky Roberts gathered the men for a final briefing. Roberts, a seasoned pilot and respected leader, emphasized the importance of teamwork and precision. The mission ahead would be challenging, but he had complete faith in their abilities. Dr. Vance H. Marchbanks, Jr., the squadron's flight surgeon, watched from the sidelines. He had seen the physical and emotional toll of war on these young men, and was committed to keeping them fit for duty. Marchbanks knew that their success depended not only on their skills in the cockpit, but also on their resilience and mental fortitude. The morning of June 2, 1943, dawned clear and bright over North Africa. The Tuskegee Airmen, now part of the 99th Fighter Squadron, were about to embark on their first combat mission. The air was thick with tension and the smell of fuel as the pilots climbed into their cockpits. Captain Davis led the formation, his face set with determination. Sergeant William H. Holloman III, the squadron's crew chief, performed a final check on the aircraft. Holloman's meticulous attention to detail ensured that each plane was in peak condition. He knew that the lives of the pilots depended on the reliability of their machines. As the engines roared to life, the pilots focused on the task ahead. Their mission was to escort bombers on a raid over Pantelleria, an Italian-held island. The flight to the target was uneventful, giving the men time to settle into their roles. But as they approached the island, the sky erupted with anti-aircraft fire. Lieutenant Hall gripped the controls, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He followed Davis's lead, maneuvering his plane through the flak. The bombers released their payload, and the squadron turned for home. Despite the harrowing experience, the mission was a success. The 99th Fighter Squadron had proven their mettle. Back at their base in Tunisia, the pilots gathered to debrief. The success of their first mission was a significant milestone, but Captain Davis reminded them that the road ahead would be long and arduous. The men nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting a mix of pride and exhaustion. Meanwhile, Major Roberts worked tirelessly to address the challenges faced by the squadron. Despite their proven abilities, the Tuskegee Airmen continued to face discrimination and skepticism from some quarters of the military. Roberts knew that they would need to consistently demonstrate their competence to change minds. Dr. Marchbanks monitored the health and morale of the squadron. The intense combat missions took a toll on the men, both physically and mentally. Marchbanks implemented rigorous fitness programs and provided counseling to help them cope with the stress of combat. The squadron's reputation grew with each successful mission. Lieutenant Hall and his fellow pilots gained confidence, their skills honed by experience. They became known for their precision and bravery, earning the respect of their peers and superiors. The Tuskegee Airmen were no longer just proving themselves. They were becoming an integral part of the war effort. As the Tuskegee Airmen continued to excel in combat, they remained acutely aware of the racial inequalities that persisted within the military. Captain Davis, a graduate of West Point and a trailblazer in his own right, was a vocal advocate for equal treatment and opportunities for African American servicemen. Lieutenant Hall, too, felt the weight of their mission. He often reflected on the sacrifices made by his family and community to support his journey to become a pilot. The letters he received from home were a constant reminder of the expectations placed upon him and his fellow airmen. They were not just fighting a war abroad, they were fighting for dignity and respect at home. The squadron's successes did not go unnoticed. Reports of their achievements reached the highest levels of the military, and the men began to receive commendations for their bravery. Yet, the struggle for recognition was ongoing. Major Roberts and Captain Davis continued to push for better resources and support for their unit. Despite the challenges, the Tuskegee Airmen remained united in their purpose. They drew strength from each other, forming bonds that transcended the barriers of race and rank. Their camaraderie and shared determination became a source of inspiration, driving them to overcome the obstacles they faced. In January 1944, the 99th Fighter Squadron was reassigned to the 332nd Fighter Group, commanded by Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. This consolidation marked a turning point in their journey. The 332nd Fighter Squadrons would now operate as a cohesive unit. Lieutenant Hall felt the renewed sense of purpose. The integration of the squadrons meant they could leverage their collective strengths and resources. The pilots trained rigorously, perfecting their tactics and coordination. Their focus was on becoming an elite fighting force, capable of taking on the most challenging missions. Sergeant Holloman and the ground crew worked around the clock to maintain the aircraft. Their dedication ensured that the planes were always mission ready, a testament to their skill and commitment. Holloman took pride in his work, knowing that the pilots' lives depended on the reliability of their machines. As the 332nd Fighter Group prepared for its next mission, the men felt a sense of anticipation and resolve. They were ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead, united in their pursuit of excellence and equality. The Tuskegee Airmen had come a long way, but the journey was far from over. The 332nd Fighter Group, now fully integrated and operational, began to make a name for themselves in the skies over Europe. One of the most distinctive aspects of their aircraft was the bright red paint on the tails of their P-51 Mustangs. This unique marking earned them the nickname Red Tails, and it soon became a symbol of excellence and bravery. Captain Davis continued to lead with unwavering resolve. His leadership was instrumental in building the group's reputation. Under his command, the Red Tails embarked on numerous bomber escort missions, protecting Allied bombers from enemy fighters. Their success rate was unparalleled, with few bombers lost to enemy action. Lieutenant Hall, now a seasoned pilot, relished the opportunity to prove himself in combat. The Red Tails' missions were not without peril, but Hall and his comrades faced each challenge head-on. The trust they placed in each other was absolute, forged through countless hours of training and the shared experience of battle.
I've sold before.
Dr. Marchbanks, ever vigilant, monitored the men's health closely. The stress of constant combat was palpable, and he worked tirelessly to ensure they remained fit and focused. Marchbanks' efforts were vital in maintaining the squadron's operational readiness and morale. In early 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group was tasked with providing air support for Operation Shingle, the Allied amphibious assault on Anzio, Italy. This mission was critical to breaking the stalemate on the Italian front and advancing towards Rome. The Red Tails were to escort bombers and conduct strafing runs on enemy positions. Captain Davis briefed his pilots on the mission's importance and the dangers they would face. The stakes were high, but the Red Tails were ready. As they took to the skies, the tension was palpable. The enemy's anti-aircraft fire was intense, and the Luftwaffe was determined to repel the Allied assault. Lieutenant Hall's squadron encountered fierce resistance. German fighters swarmed their formation, and the sky was filled with the chaos of aerial combat. Hall's heart pounded as he maneuvered his aircraft, firing at enemy planes and dodging their attacks. The Red Tails fought with determination, protecting the bombers and supporting the ground troops below. The mission was a success. The Red Tails' efforts played a crucial role in the Allied forces securing a foothold at Anzio. Their bravery and skill were instrumental in the operation's success, further cementing their reputation as elite pilots. The success of the Red Tails did not go unnoticed. Their exceptional performance in protecting bombers and achieving mission objectives earned them commendations and accolades. General Henry H. Arnold, the commanding general of the U.S. Army Air Forces, praised their bravery and skill, acknowledging their contribution to the war effort. Despite the recognition, the Red Tails continued to face challenges. Discrimination and skepticism persisted within some quarters of the military. Captain Davis and Major Roberts remained steadfast in their advocacy for equal treatment and opportunities for African American servicemen. Their fight for justice was far from over. Sergeant Holloman and the ground crew faced their own set of challenges. Maintaining the aircraft in peak condition required relentless effort and expertise. Holloman's team worked tirelessly, often under difficult conditions, to ensure the planes were ready for each mission. Their dedication was a crucial component of the Red Tail's success, since values themselves upon the world on Earth. It played the primary and secondary part of the global effort, refused by death by coach officials. There's a big onlookers on the image. Dr. Marchbanks continued his mission to support the pilot's well-being. The toll of combat was evident, and he provided counseling and medical care to help them cope with the physical and psychological stress. Marchbanks's role was vital in sustaining the squadron's morale and effectiveness. In the spring of 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group was relocated to the Ramitelli airfield in Italy. This move brought them closer to the front lines and allowed for more direct support of Allied operations. The new base was a hive of activity, with pilots and ground crew working tirelessly to prepare for the next mission. Captain Davis and Lieutenant Hall welcomed the change. The proximity to the front lines meant more frequent and diverse missions, from bomber escorts to ground attack operations. The Red Tails were ready to take on whatever challenges came their way. Sergeant Holloman and his team set up their maintenance operations at the new airfield. The move presented logistical challenges, but Holloman's expertise ensured a smooth transition. The ground crew's efficiency was critical in keeping the squadron's aircraft operational. Specific instructions had been given so that the airfield could give safeguarding and a discretionary toll to the ground crew. Arriving at the facility at Ramitelli, Dr. Marchbanks established a medical facility at Ramitelli, providing care for the pilots and ground crew. The increased operational tempo meant more injuries and stress issues, and Marchbanks's role was more important than ever. His dedication to the men's well-being was a constant source of support. One of the most significant missions the Red Tails undertook was the escort of bombers on a raid over Berlin. This mission, deep into enemy territory, was fraught with danger. The Luftwaffe was determined to defend the heart of the Third Reich, and the Red Tails knew they would face intense resistance. Captain Davis led the formation with his characteristic calm and focus. The bombers they were escorting carried a vital payload intended to cripple Germany's war industry. The success of the mission was crucial to the Allied war effort. Captain Davis led the formation and included 3 other European officers. Lieutenant Hall's hands tightened on the controls as they approached Berlin. The sky was filled with flak, and German fighters launched ferocious attacks. The Red Tails engaged the enemy with precision and bravery, protecting the bombers as they released their payloads. The mission was a success, and the bombers returned with minimal losses. The Red Tails' performance was exemplary, demonstrating their skill and courage. The Berlin mission was a testament to their dedication and the culmination of their relentless training and teamwork. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen is a tale of courage, resilience, and breaking barriers. Through the interwoven perspectives of real-life individuals, their journey from the training fields of Tuskegee to the skies over Europe is a testament to their indomitable spirit and the fight for equality. The Red Tails' legacy continues to inspire future generations, a reminder of the power of perseverance and the pursuit of justice. The 332nd Fighter Group faced one of their toughest challenges yet during the mission to escort bombers on a raid over the Ploiesti oil fields in Romania. This area was heavily defended by the Axis forces, as the oil fields were crucial to the German war effort. Captain Davis knew the importance of this mission and briefed his men thoroughly. Lieutenant Hall prepared for the mission with a mixture of anticipation and resolve. The previous missions had taught him the harsh realities of aerial combat, and he was determined to protect the bombers at all costs. The stakes were high, and every pilot understood the critical nature of their task. As the formation approached Ploiesti, they encountered heavy anti-aircraft fire and swarms of German fighters. The sky became a chaotic battlefield, with planes weaving through bursts of flak and engaging in dogfights. Hall's heart pounded as he maneuvered his P-51 Mustang, firing at enemy aircraft and engaging in dogfight. Hall's heart pounded as he encountered dogfights approaching anti-aircraft fire. Sergeant Holloman and his ground crew back at Ramitelli monitored the mission's progress via radio. The tension was palpable as they listened to the reports of intense combat. Holloman knew that his meticulous maintenance work on the aircraft was crucial to the pilot's survival in such a hostile environment. The mission was grueling, but the Red Tails held their own, successfully protecting the bombers and contributing to the raid's success. The Ploiesti mission showcased the Tuskegee Airmen's bravery and skill, further solidifying their reputation as elite pilots. The success of the Ploiesti mission and other critical operations earned the Red Tails numerous commendations. Captain Davis received the Distinguished Flying Cross for his leadership and bravery. His achievements were not only a testament to his skills as a pilot and commander, but also a significant step forward in breaking racial barriers in the military. Lieutenant Hall and several other pilots were also recognized for their exceptional performance in combat. Hall was awarded the Air Medal, a symbol of his dedication and courage. The recognition bolstered the squadron's morale and reinforced their commitment to their mission. Major Roberts continued to advocate for the Tuskegee Airmen, pushing for greater recognition and equal treatment. The accolades received by the Red Tails were a vindication of their abilities and a step towards achieving the equality they sought. Roberts's relentless efforts played a crucial role in advancing their cause. Dr. Marchbanks was proud of the pilots' achievements, but remained focused on their well-being. The intensity of combat operations took a toll on the men, and Marchbanks provided ongoing support and care. His role was indispensable in maintaining the squadron's physical and mental health. The introduction of the P-51 Mustang to the 332nd Fighter Group marked a significant evolution in their capabilities. The Mustang was faster, had a longer range, and was more heavily armed than their previous aircraft. Captain Davis saw the potential of the new planes and ensured that the pilots received thorough training on the Mustangs. Lieutenant Hall quickly adapted to the P-51, appreciating its improved performance and maneuverability. The Mustang became an extension of himself in combat, enhancing his effectiveness as a fighter pilot. The squadron's transition to the new aircraft was seamless, thanks to their rigorous training and adaptability. Sergeant Holloman and his ground crew faced the challenge of maintaining the new aircraft. The Mustang's advanced technology required precise and expert handling. Holloman's team rose to the occasion, mastering the intricacies of the P-51 and ensuring that the planes were always in top condition for missions. The P-51 Mustang allowed the Red Tails to undertake longer escort missions, providing crucial support to Allied bombers deep into enemy territory. The enhanced capabilities of the Mustangs enabled the Tuskegee Airmen to achieve even greater success in their operations, further establishing their legacy. In late 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group was tasked with providing air support for the Allied advance against the Gothic Line in Italy. This heavily fortified German defensive line was a formidable obstacle, and the Allies needed air superiority to break through. Captain Davis led the mission with his characteristic focus and determination. The Red Tails' role was to conduct strafing runs and provide close air support to ground troops. The terrain and enemy defenses made the mission particularly challenging, but the Red Tails were ready. Lieutenant Hall's squadron flew low over the rugged Italian landscape, targeting enemy positions and providing cover for advancing Allied forces. The intensity of the ground fire was staggering, but Hall and his fellow pilots pressed on, determined to support the troops below. Sergeant Holloman and his team worked tirelessly to keep the Mustangs operational. The demands of the mission required that the aircraft be in peak condition at all times. Holloman's expertise and dedication were vital to the success of the Red Tails operations. The mission was a success, with the Red Tails playing a crucial role in the Allied advance. Their efforts helped to break the Gothic Line, a significant victory in the Italian campaign. The bravery and skill of the Tuskegee Airmen were once again instrumental in achieving Allied objectives. In March 1945, the 332nd Fighter Group was assigned to escort bombers on a raid over Nuremberg, Germany. This mission was part of the Allied strategic bombing campaign aimed at crippling the Nazi war machine. The Red Tails' reputation for excellence made them the ideal choice for this critical operation. Captain Davis briefed his pilots on the mission's objectives and the expected challenges. The Luftwaffe's resistance was anticipated to be fierce, and the bombers needed the Red Tail's protection to reach their targets. The stakes were high, and the pilots prepared with steely determination. Lieutenant Hall's hands tightened on the controls as they neared Nuremberg. The sky was filled with flak and enemy fighters. Hall's squadron engaged the German planes, dogfighting with precision and courage. The chaos of the battle tested their skill and resolve. Sergeant Holloman and his ground crew listened to the radio transmissions, their hearts in their throats. The mission's outcome hinged on the reliability of the aircraft they had meticulously maintained. Holloman's confidence in his work was a source of reassurance amid the tension. The Nuremberg raid was a success, with the bombers delivering their payloads and returning with minimal losses. The Red Tail's performance was exemplary, further cementing their legacy as elite pilots. The mission was a testament to their bravery, skill, and the unbreakable bond between the pilots and their ground crew. As the war in Europe neared its end, the 332nd Fighter Group continued to play a vital role in Allied operations. The final push into Germany required relentless air support, and the Red Tails were at the forefront of these efforts. Their missions ranged from bomber escorts to ground attack operations, each one critical to the overall success of the campaign. Captain Davis maintained his unwavering focus, leading his men with the same determination that had carried them through countless missions. The end of the war was in sight, but the dangers remained. Davis emphasized the importance of staying vigilant and focused until the very end. Lieutenant Hall and his fellow pilots were acutely aware of the significance of their missions. The prospect of victory was a powerful motivator, but they also knew that each mission could be their last. The camaraderie among the Red Tails was a source of strength, bolstering their resolve as they faced the final battles. Sergeant Holloman and his ground crew worked tirelessly to keep the Mustangs operational. The intensity of the final push demanded their utmost dedication and expertise. Holloman's leadership ensured that the aircraft were always mission ready, a testament to his skill and commitment. Dr. Marchbanks continued to provide crucial support, addressing the physical and mental toll of the relentless combat operations. His care and guidance were indispensable in sustaining the squadron's effectiveness and morale. The end of the war was near, but the challenges were far from over. In his mid-1920s uniformed regiment, the summer officers enclosed by uncomfortable diets they had spent living on. On May 8, 1945, the war in Europe officially ended with the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany. The news of victory in Europe Day brought a wave of relief and celebration across the Allied forces. For the Tuskegee Airmen, it was a moment of triumph and reflection. Captain Davis gathered his men to acknowledge their contributions and the significance of their achievements. The Red Tails had not only excelled in combat, but had also broken racial barriers and proven the capabilities of African American pilots. Their legacy was one of courage, resilience, and groundbreaking success. Lieutenant Hall felt a deep sense of pride as he reflected on his journey. From the training fields of Tuskegee to the skies over Europe, he and his comrades had faced incredible challenges and emerged victorious. The friendships and bonds forged in battle would endure long after the war. Sergeant Holloman and his ground crew celebrated their hard-earned victory. Their relentless dedication had played a crucial role in the Red Tails' success. Holloman's pride in his work and his team's achievements was immeasurable. Dr. Marchbanks felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The end of the war marked the culmination of his efforts to support and care for the pilots and ground crew. His role had been vital in maintaining their health and morale, and he took pride in their collective achievements. His role proved very successful. With the end of the war in Europe, the Tuskegee Airmen began the process of returning home. The transition from the battlefields of Europe to civilian life was a significant adjustment. Captain Davis and his men reflected on their experiences and the impact of their service. Lieutenant Hall returned to North Carolina, where he was greeted as a hero. The pride of his family and community was palpable, and Hall took on a new role as a mentor and advocate for young African Americans aspiring to aviation careers. His journey was far from over, as he dedicated himself to breaking new barriers. Sergeant Holloman and his ground crew faced the challenge of reintegration. The skills and expertise they had developed during the war were invaluable, and Holloman leveraged his experience to advance in his career. His leadership and dedication continued to inspire those around him. Dr. Marchbanks returned to his medical practice, but his experiences with the Red Tails left a lasting impact. He remained an advocate for veterans and dedicated himself to addressing the unique challenges they faced. Marchbanks' commitment to service and care extended beyond the battlefield. The legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen endured long after the war. Their achievements and contributions were recognized and celebrated, paving the way for future generations of African American aviators. The Red Tails had not only excelled in combat, but had also shattered racial barriers and set new standards of excellence. Captain Davis continued to advocate for equality and justice within the military and beyond. His leadership and vision inspired others to follow in his footsteps, breaking new ground and advancing the cause of civil rights. Davis's legacy was one of courage, determination, and relentless pursuit of justice. Lieutenant Hall became a prominent figure in aviation, using his experiences to mentor and inspire young aviators. His story was a testament to the power of perseverance and the importance of breaking down barriers. Hall's impact extended far beyond his wartime service, shaping the future of aviation and civil rights. Sergeant Holloman's contributions were recognized and celebrated. His expertise and leadership during the war laid the foundation for future advancements in aircraft maintenance and engineering. Holloman's legacy was one of innovation, dedication, and excellence. Dr. Marchbanks's commitment to veterans' care and advocacy continued to make a difference. His work highlighted the importance of addressing the unique challenges faced by servicemen and women, and his legacy was one of compassion, dedication, and service. In the years following the war, efforts were made to honor the Tuskegee Airmen and their contributions. The Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site was established in Alabama, preserving the legacy of these pioneering aviators. The memorial served as a tribute to their bravery, skill, and groundbreaking achievements. Captain Davis, Lieutenant Hall, Sergeant Holloman, and Dr. Marchbanks attended the dedication ceremony, reflecting on their journey and the impact of their service. The memorial was a testament to their collective efforts and a symbol of the enduring legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen is a powerful narrative of courage, resilience, and breaking barriers. Through the interwoven perspectives of real-life individuals, their journey from the training fields of Tuskegee to the skies over Europe is a testament to their indomitable spirit and the fight for equality. The Redtail's legacy continues to inspire future generations and the pursuit of justice. Their story is a beacon of hope and a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. The journey of the Tuskegee Airmen, from their rigorous training at Tuskegee Institute to their heroic missions in the skies over Europe, exemplifies their dedication, skill, and resilience. Their legacy is one of breaking barriers, challenging prejudices, and achieving excellence. The contributions of Captain Davis, Lieutenant Hall, Sergeant Holloman, Dr. Marchbanks, and their comrades have left an indelible mark on history. After the war, Captain Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. continued his career in the United States Air Force. His experiences with the Tuskegee Airmen had solidified his determination to advocate for racial equality within the military. Davis used his position and influence to push for desegregation and equal opportunities for African American servicemen. Davis's efforts were instrumental in the integration of the U.S. military. He was appointed to various high-ranking positions, where he worked tirelessly to ensure that the contributions of African American soldiers were recognized and respected. His leadership and advocacy were critical in shaping a more inclusive military. Lieutenant Charles Hall also dedicated himself to advocacy. He became a prominent speaker and mentor, sharing his experiences with young African Americans. Hall's stories of courage and perseverance inspired many to pursue careers in aviation and the military, breaking down barriers and challenging stereotypes. Sergeant William Holloman III continued his work in aviation, using his skills and experience to advance the field. He also became a vocal advocate for the recognition of the Tuskegee Airmen's contributions. Holloman's efforts were crucial in preserving the legacy of the Red Tails and ensuring that their story was told. Dr. Roscoe Brown Jr., another prominent member of the Tuskegee Airmen, transitioned into academia. He earned a doctorate in education and became a professor, dedicating his career to educating future generations about the importance of diversity and inclusion. Brown's work in education and his advocacy for civil rights left a lasting impact. In 1945, a significant event known as the Freeman Field Mutiny took place. This was a peaceful protest by African American officers against segregation in the U.S. Army Air Forces. The incident occurred at Freeman Field in Indiana, where black officers were prohibited from entering certain facilities designated for white officers. Captain Davis was a key figure in the aftermath of the mutiny. He supported the officers' actions and advocated for their fair treatment. The mutiny brought national attention to the issue of segregation in the military and highlighted the ongoing struggle for equality faced by African American servicemen. Lieutenant Hall and other Tuskegee Airmen supported their fellow officers' stand against segregation. The mutiny was a pivotal moment in the fight for civil rights within the military. The actions of these brave officers eventually led to significant changes in military policies, including the desegregation of the U.S. Armed Forces. Sergeant Holloman, while not directly involved in the mutiny, understood the importance of the protest. He continued to work towards advancing the cause of equality within the military and ensuring that the contributions of African American servicemen were recognized. But it's taken him many years to find the words to express his disparagement for the mutiny. Dr. Brown, who later became an influential advocate for civil rights, viewed the Freeman Field Mutiny as a crucial step towards achieving equality. His reflections on the event emphasize the importance of standing up against injustice, even in the face of significant opposition. The efforts of the Tuskegee Airmen and other African American servicemen culminated in a historic milestone in 1948. President Harry S. Truman signed Executive Order 90101, which mandated the desegregation of the U.S. Armed Forces. This was a significant victory for the civil rights movement and a testament to the relentless advocacy of leaders like Captain Davis. Davis played a crucial role in the implementation of the executive order. His leadership and experience were invaluable in navigating the challenges of integrating the military. Davis's efforts ensured that African American servicemen were given equal opportunities and that their contributions were recognized. Lieutenant Hall and other Tuskegee Airmen celebrated the executive order as a major victory. The integration of the armed forces was a testament to their perseverance and dedication. Hall continued his advocacy work, using his experiences to inspire future generations of African American aviators. Sergeant Holloman, who had seen the impact of segregation firsthand, welcomed the changes brought about by the executive order. He continued his work in aviation, ensuring that the next generation of African American servicemen had the opportunities that had been denied to him and his peers. Dr. Brown's reflections on the integration of the armed forces highlighted the significance of this milestone. He emphasized the importance of continued advocacy and education to ensure that the gains made were not lost. Brown's work in academia and civil rights advocacy helped to sustain the momentum of the movement. As the years passed, efforts to honor the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen gained momentum. Memorials, museums, and educational programs were established to preserve their history and contributions. The Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site in Alabama became a focal point for these efforts, attracting visitors from around the world. Captain Davis was instrumental in these initiatives, using his influence to ensure that the legacy of the Red Tails was preserved. He worked with historians, educators, and community leaders to create programs that highlighted the achievements and sacrifices of the Tuskegee Airmen. Lieutenant Hall contributed to these efforts by participating in speaking engagements and educational programs. He shared his experiences with young people, emphasizing the importance of perseverance and the pursuit of excellence. Hall's storytelling brought the history of the Tuskegee Airmen to life for new generations. Sergeant Holloman's work in preserving the legacy of the Red Tails extended to his involvement in aviation museums and historical societies. He collaborated with curators and historians to ensure that the technical aspects of the aircraft and missions were accurately represented. Dr. Brown's academic work included research and publications on the Tuskegee Airmen. He used his platform as a professor to educate students about the importance of diversity and inclusion in all fields. Brown's scholarship contributed to a deeper understanding of the Tuskegee Airmen. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen eventually found its way into popular culture, with books, films, and documentaries bringing their history to a wider audience. These portrayals helped to ensure that the legacy of the Red Tails was not forgotten and inspired new generations to learn about their contributions. Captain Davis supported these projects, providing insights and first-hand accounts to ensure their accuracy. His involvement helped to shape the narrative and ensure that the story of the Tuskegee Airmen was told with the respect and authenticity it deserved. Lieutenant Hall also participated in these projects, sharing his experiences and emphasizing the importance of historical accuracy. His contributions ensured that the portrayals of the Tuskegee Airmen were grounded in reality and highlighted the challenges and triumphs they faced. Sergeant Holloman's technical expertise was invaluable in ensuring that the details of the aircraft and missions were accurately represented. His collaboration with filmmakers and authors helped to create realistic and compelling portrayals of the Red Tails. Dr. Brown's academic work provided a foundation for many of these projects. His research and publications were often cited in books and documentaries, ensuring that the story of the Tuskegee Airmen was told with the depth and context it deserved. The impact of the Tuskegee Airmen extended far beyond their wartime achievements. Their legacy inspired generations of African Americans to pursue careers in aviation, military service, and other fields. The barriers they broke down and the challenges they overcame served as a powerful example of what could be achieved through perseverance and dedication. Captain Davis continued to mentor young aviators, using his experiences to guide and inspire them. His leadership and advocacy helped to create opportunities for future generations, ensuring that the path he and his comrades had forged remained open. Lieutenant Hall's influence extended to his community and beyond. He worked with youth organizations and educational programs to inspire young people to pursue their dreams, regardless of the obstacles they faced. Hall's story was a testament to the power of determination and the importance of breaking down barriers. Sergeant Holloman's contributions to aviation continued to be recognized and celebrated. His work in preserving the history of the Tuskegee Airmen ensured that their legacy remained alive for future generations. Holloman's dedication to his craft and his commitment to excellence were an enduring inspiration. Dr. Brown's academic and advocacy work left a lasting impact on the field of education and civil rights. His scholarship and mentorship helped to shape the next generation of leaders, ensuring that the lessons of the Tuskegee Airmen were not forgotten. Brown's legacy was one of service, education, and the relentless pursuit of justice. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen is one of courage, resilience, and breaking barriers. Their journey from the training fields of Tuskegee to the skies over Europe is a powerful testament to their dedication and skill. The legacy of Captain Davis, Lieutenant Hall, Sergeant Holloman, Dr. Brown, and their comrades continues to inspire and educate, reminding us of the power of perseverance and the importance of fighting for equality. The formation of the Tuskegee Airmen began in 1941, when the War Department established the Tuskegee Army Airfield in Alabama as a training site for African American pilots. This decision came after persistent lobbying by civil rights organizations and the pressing need for more pilots during World War II. Captain Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. was among the first group of cadets to train at Tuskegee. His leadership skills and commitment to excellence quickly became evident. Davis, the son of the first African American general in the U.S. Army, had faced discrimination throughout his military career, but remained steadfast in his pursuit of equality. Other notable cadets included Lieutenant Charles Hall, who would later become the first African American to shoot down an enemy aircraft, and Lieutenant Lee Archer, who went on to become one of the most successful fighter pilots of the war. These men, along with their fellow trainees, faced the dual challenge of rigorous military training and pervasive military prejudice, sleeping at front to duty and rigor successes. Dr. Roscoe Brown, Jr., another key figure in the Tuskegee Airmen, was known for his academic prowess and exceptional flying skills. He and his peers were determined to prove their capabilities, not only to themselves, but to a nation that doubted their abilities. Training at Tuskegee was grueling. The cadets faced intense physical and mental challenges, learning to fly various aircraft and mastering combat tactics. Despite the rigorous demands, the men of Tuskegee were united by a common goal: to serve their country and prove their worth. Captain Davis led by example, earning the respect and admiration of his peers. He demonstrated exceptional flying skills and a keen strategic mind, qualities that would later serve him well in combat. His leadership was instrumental in maintaining morale and fostering a sense of camaraderie among the cadets. Lieutenant Hall, known for his determination and resilience, often encouraged his fellow trainees during difficult times. His optimism and unwavering belief in their mission helped sustain the group's spirit. Hall's ability to stay focused and positive under pressure became one of his defining characteristics. Sergeant William Holloman III, who later became an integral part of the Tuskegee Airmen's ground crew, worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that the aircraft were in top condition. His expertise and dedication were crucial to the success of the pilots, and he took great pride in his role. Dr. Brown excelled in both his studies and his flying. His analytical mind and attention to detail made him a standout cadet. He often spent his free time mentoring other trainees, sharing his knowledge and helping them overcome their struggles. The Tuskegee Airmen's first combat mission took place in 1943, when the 99th Fighter Squadron was deployed to North Africa. This marked a significant milestone in their journey, as they were now part of the Allied effort against the Axis powers. The mission was led by Captain Davis, whose leadership and strategic acumen were put to the test. The squadron faced numerous challenges, including harsh desert conditions and the constant threat of enemy attacks. Despite these obstacles, they performed admirably, earning the respect of their fellow servicemen and proving their capabilities as pilots. Lieutenant Hall's performance during the mission was exemplary. His keen instincts and quick thinking helped him navigate dangerous situations and achieved several successful sorties. Hall's courage and skill were evident as he engaged enemy aircraft and provided crucial support to ground troops. Sergeant Holloman and the ground crew played a vital role in maintaining the squadron's aircraft. Their tireless efforts ensured that the planes were always ready for action. Holloman's leadership and technical expertise were instrumental in keeping the squadron operational. Dr. Brown's analytical skills were put to use in planning and executing the missions. His ability to assess situations and develop effective strategies made him a valuable asset to the squadron. Brown's contributions extended beyond flying, as he often provided critical insights during mission briefings. The success of the Tuskegee Airmen's first combat mission did not go unnoticed. Their achievements were celebrated by their peers and commanding officers. and they began to receive recognition for their contributions to the war effort. However, despite their successes, they continued to face discrimination and skepticism from some quarters. Captain Davis was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel, a testament to his leadership and accomplishments. He continued to advocate for the integration of the military, using his position to push for equal treatment and opportunities for African American servicemen. Lieutenant Hall's reputation as a skilled pilot grew with each mission. He became a symbol of the Tuskegee Airmen's capabilities and potential, inspiring others to join the cause. Hall's perseverance and dedication were critical in maintaining the squadron's morale and cohesion. Sergeant Holloman's contributions were also recognized. His work behind the scenes was essential to the squadron's success, and his expertise became widely respected. Holloman's dedication to his craft set a high standard for others to follow. Dr. Brown continued to excel in his dual roles as a pilot and strategist. His ability to analyze complex situations and develop effective solutions made him an invaluable member of the squadron. Brown's commitment to excellence and his willingness to share his knowledge with others helped to strengthen the entire unit. In 1944, the Tuskegee Airmen were deployed to Italy as part of the Allied invasion. This marked another significant chapter in their journey as they faced new challenges and opportunities in a different theatre of war. The Italian campaign was crucial for the Allies, and the Tuskegee Airmen were determined to make their mark. Lieutenant Colonel Davis led the 332nd Fighter Group, which was tasked with providing bomber escort and conducting ground attack missions. The group's performance was exceptional, and their distinctive red-tailed aircraft became a symbol of excellence and reliability. Lieutenant Hall continued to distinguish himself in combat. His bravery and skill were on full display during numerous missions, where he often found himself in the thick of the action. Hall's contributions were critical in ensuring the success of the bombers they escorted. Sergeant Holloman and the ground crew faced the challenge of maintaining the aircraft in difficult conditions. The rugged terrain and constant threat of enemy attacks made their job even more demanding. However, Holloman's leadership and expertise ensured that the planes were always mission-ready. Dr. Brown's strategic insights were invaluable during the Italian campaign. His ability to anticipate enemy movements and develop effective countermeasures helped the squadron navigate complex and dangerous situations. Brown's contributions extended beyond the cockpit, as he played a key role in planning and executing missions. The Tuskegee Airmen's achievements in the Italian campaign earned them numerous accolades, including the Distinguished Flying Cross. This prestigious award recognized their exceptional bravery and skill in combat. The recognition was a significant milestone, highlighting their contributions to the war effort. The Tuskegee Airmen's achievements in the Italian campaign earned the Tuskegee Airmen the title of America's first Battle Special Forces. Lieutenant Colonel Davis was particularly proud of this achievement, as it validated the hard work and dedication of his men. He continued to lead by example, pushing for greater recognition and opportunities for African American servicemen. Lieutenant Hall was among the recipients of the Distinguished Flying Cross. His exceptional performance and unwavering courage had earned him a place among the elite pilots of the war. Hall's achievements were a testament to his skill and determination. Sergeant Holloman's contributions were also recognized. Although he was not a pilot, his work was crucial to the squadron's success. The Distinguished Flying Cross was a fitting tribute to his dedication and expertise. Dr. Brown's role in the squadron's success was acknowledged as well. His strategic insights and exceptional flying skills had played a significant part in their achievements. The award was a testament to his contributions and the high regard in which he was held by his peers. While the Tuskegee Airmen were achieving success on the battlefield, they continued to face challenges on the home front. Despite their contributions, racial discrimination and segregation remained pervasive. The men of Tuskegee were determined to use their experiences to advocate for change. Lieutenant Colonel Davis became increasingly vocal in his efforts to promote integration and equal treatment within the military. He worked with civil rights organizations and government officials to push for reforms, using his platform to highlight the contributions of African American servicemen. Lieutenant Hall also became an advocate for civil rights. His experiences in combat had given him a new perspective on the importance of equality and justice. Hall's efforts to promote change were driven by a deep sense of duty and a desire to honor the sacrifices of his comrades. Sergeant Holloman continued his work in aviation, but he also became involved in efforts to promote diversity and inclusion within the field. His experiences had shown him the importance of breaking down barriers and creating opportunities for all. Dr. Brown's academic and advocacy work focused on the intersection of education and civil rights. He used his platform to educate others about the importance of diversity and inclusion, drawing on his experiences with the Tuskegee Airmen to illustrate the impact of these issues. The integration of the U.S. Armed Forces following the signing of Executive Order 908 had a profound impact on the Tuskegee Airmen and their efforts. The order marked a significant step towards equality and provided new opportunities for African American servicemen. Lieutenant Colonel Davis played a key role in the integration process, using his leadership and experience to navigate the challenges and opportunities that arose. His efforts helped to pave the way for a more inclusive military, and his legacy continued to inspire future generations. Lieutenant Hall embraced the opportunities created by integration, continuing his work as a mentor and advocate. He used his experiences to guide and inspire others, helping to break down barriers and promote equality within the military and beyond. Sergeant Holloman's contributions were also significant. His work in aviation continued to be recognized and celebrated, and he used his platform to promote diversity and inclusion. Holloman's efforts were instrumental in ensuring that the gains made through integration were sustained. Dr. Brown's academic and advocacy work focused on the broader implications of integration. He used his research and publications to highlight the importance of diversity and inclusion in all fields, drawing on the experiences of the Tuskegee Airmen to illustrate the impact of these issues. The legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen continued to grow as their contributions were recognized and celebrated through various honors and memorials. The establishment of the Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site in Alabama was a significant milestone, ensuring that their story would be preserved for future generations. Lieutenant Colonel Davis was honored with numerous awards and accolades throughout his career. His leadership and advocacy had left a lasting impact, and his legacy continued to inspire others. Davis's efforts to promote equality and justice were a testament to his commitment and dedication. Lieutenant Hall's contributions were also celebrated. He received numerous awards for his bravery and skill, and his story continued to inspire new generations of aviators. Hall's legacy was one of perseverance and excellence, reflecting the values of the Tuskegee Airmen. Sergeant Holloman's work was recognized through various honors and memorials. His contributions to aviation and his efforts to promote diversity and inclusion were celebrated, ensuring that his legacy would be remembered. Dr. Brown's academic and advocacy work left a lasting impact on the field of education and civil rights. His scholarship and mentorship helped to shape the next generation of leaders, ensuring that the lessons of the Tuskegee Airmen were not forgotten. Brown's legacy was one of service, education, and the relentless pursuit of justice. As the 21st century dawned, the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen continued to influence and inspire. Their story was integrated into educational curricula, and their contributions were celebrated through various media, including books, films, and documentaries. The Tuskegee Airmen's impact extended to the modern U.S. Air Force, where their legacy of excellence and perseverance was honored through various initiatives and programs. The Red Tail's distinctive markings were adopted by modern fighter squadrons, serving as a constant reminder of their contributions. The Tuskegee Airmen, Lieutenant Colonel Davis's influence continued to be felt, as his leadership and advocacy had set a high standard for future generations. His efforts to promote equality and justice were a lasting legacy, inspiring others to follow in his footsteps. Lieutenant Hall's story continued to inspire new generations of aviators and advocates. His bravery and skill were celebrated, and his legacy of perseverance and dedication remained a powerful example for others to follow. Sergeant Holloman's contributions to aviation and his efforts to promote diversity and inclusion continue to be recognized and celebrated. His work had left a lasting impact, ensuring that the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen would be remembered for generations to come. Dr. Brown's academic and advocacy work continued to influence the field of education and civil rights. His scholarship and mentorship had shaped the next generation of leaders, ensuring that the lessons of the Tuskegee Airmen were not forgotten. I, the first the Tuskegee Airman, was helped to become the first black college professor. General Ulysses S. Grant stood atop a ridge, peering through his field glasses at the Confederate stronghold of Vicksburg. Below him, the mighty Mississippi River snaked its way south, a vital artery for the Confederacy. It was May 18, 1863, and the Union Army had finally surrounded the city. Grant's campaign to encircle Vicksburg had been arduous, marked by failed attempts and relentless maneuvering through swampy terrain and hostile territory. Major General William T. Sherman, Grant's trusted lieutenant, approached with a map in hand. "The men are in position, General," Sherman reported. "We've got them pinned. Now, it's just a matter of time." Grant nodded, his face etched with determination. The city's fortifications were formidable, but he was confident in his men's resolve. The 45th Illinois Infantry, commanded by Colonel Jasper A. Maltby, was among the units forming the encirclement. Among Maltby's ranks was Private William H. Blackburn, a young farmer from Illinois who had enlisted to preserve the Union. Inside Vicksburg, Major General John C. Pemberton faced a grim reality. His forces were outnumbered and cut off from reinforcements. The city's steep bluffs and intricate network of fortifications had made it a formidable bastion, but now those same defenses trapped them within. Lieutenant Colonel E.G.S. McNeely, a dedicated officer from Mississippi, was among those charged with defending the city. He moved along the parapets, rallying his men and overseeing the reinforcement of their positions. "Hold the line," he commanded. "We cannot let the Yankees break through." Civilians too braced themselves for the siege. Emma Balfour, a prominent Vicksburg resident, documented the escalating tension in her diary. Her husband, Dr. William T. Balfour, prepared for the inevitable influx of wounded soldiers, knowing his medical supplies were already dangerously low. Union soldiers dug trenches and constructed earthworks under the relentless sun. Private Blackburn and his comrades labored tirelessly, fortifying their positions and preparing for the long siege ahead. The crack of distant rifle fire and the occasional boom of artillery punctuated their work. Union soldiers dug trenches and constructed earthworks under the long siege ahead. Blackburn found solace in writing letters to his wife, Mary. He described the harsh conditions and the camaraderie that kept him going. "We are determined to see this through," he wrote. "I dream of the day I can return to you, knowing we have preserved the Union." Sergeant John C. Hauser, another member of the 45th Illinois, shared similar sentiments. The soldiers found strength in each other, forming bonds that transcended the brutality of war. On May 22, 1863, Grant ordered a massive bombardment to weaken the Confederate defenses. Union cannons roared to life, hurling shells into the city. Colonel James H. Wilson, overseeing the artillery placements, directed the onslaught with precision. The goal was to break the will of Vicksburg's defenders and force a surrender. Inside the city, the bombardment wreaked havoc. Emma Balfour's diary entries grew more frantic as the shelling intensified. "The noise is deafening," she wrote. "Our home trembles with each explosion. We can do nothing but pray and hope for an end to this nightmare." Dr. Balfour worked tirelessly in makeshift hospitals, treating the wounded as best he could with dwindling supplies. The civilians of Vicksburg showed remarkable resilience, supporting each other and finding solace in their faith and community. As the siege dragged on, supplies within Vicksburg dwindled, food became scarce, and starvation loomed over the civilian population and soldiers alike. Pemberton's men were forced to eat horses, mules, and even dogs to survive. Lieutenant Colonel McNeely and his troops felt the physical and psychological toll of hunger, but remained resolute. Private Blackburn, though better supplied than his Confederate counterparts, also faced hardships. The constant state of alert and the gruesome sight of dead comrades weighed heavily on his mind. He found solace in camaraderie, sharing stories and rations with fellow soldiers. To keep spirits high, Grant ordered the construction of saps, zigzag trenches, designed to bring his men closer to the enemy fortifications while minimizing exposure. Colonel James H. Wilson and his engineers worked tirelessly to execute this dangerous task. Sappers, the men tasked with digging these trenches, faced constant threats from sharpshooters and artillery. Private Blackburn volunteered for sapper duty. The work was grueling and perilous, but he believed it was a crucial step toward ending the siege. He wrote to Mary, describing the nerve-wracking experience of digging under enemy fire, but also his determination to see it through. Inside Vicksburg, civilians like Emma Balfour and her neighbors showed remarkable courage. Emma's diary entries highlighted the community's efforts to support each other, sharing whatever food they had and tending to the wounded. Her husband, Dr. Balfour, continued his tireless work, often operating under candlelight as supplies ran out. The Confederate soldiers took inspiration from the civilians' resilience. Lieutenant Colonel McNeely often spoke to his men about the importance of their cause and the support they received from Vicksburg's residents. Despite the dire situation, a sense of unity and purpose kept their spirits alive. Grant's strategy included psychological tactics to break the Confederate morale. He ordered his troops to send taunting messages over the lines, suggesting that surrender was inevitable. Confederate soldiers, already weakened by hunger and constant bombardment, found these messages demoralizing. Lieutenant Colonel McNeely and his officers worked hard to counteract this psychological warfare. They held regular briefings, bolstering their men's resolve with speeches about honor, duty, and the hope that relief might come. The war of words and wills was as intense as the physical combat. As June turned into July, Grant prepared for a final assault. The Union sappers had dug close enough to breach the Confederate fortifications. On July 1, 1863, Grant ordered an all-out attack, hoping to force a decisive victory. The Union soldiers, exhausted but resolute, launched themselves at the Confederate lines. Private Blackburn was among the first to charge. The fighting was fierce and chaotic, with bayonets clashing and gunfire ringing out. Amid the smoke and confusion, Blackburn fought with all his strength, driven by the hope that this assault would end the siege. The assault on July 1 did not immediately break the Confederate defenses, but it was clear that Vicksburg could not hold out much longer. On July 3, Grant sent a formal demand for surrender to Pemberton. The terms were harsh, reflecting the Union's upper hand. Pemberton, realizing the dire situation, but hoping for better terms, decided to negotiate. Under a blazing sun, Grant and Pemberton met between the lines. The negotiations were tense. each man representing a cause greater than themselves. Ultimately, they agreed on terms that allowed the Confederate soldiers to be paroled rather than imprisoned, a decision aimed at fostering future reconciliation. On July 4, 1863, Vicksburg formally surrendered. The once proud Confederate defenders, now weary and emaciated, marched out of their fortifications and laid down their arms. Private Blackburn watched as the Confederate soldiers filed past, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. Within Vicksburg, Emma Balfour wrote of the surreal silence that followed the surrender. Dr. Balfour, now faced with treating both Union and Confederate wounded, saw the human cost of the conflict in stark relief. The city's residents, though relieved that the bombardment had ended, faced an uncertain future. The surrender of Vicksburg was a turning point in the Civil War, effectively splitting the Confederacy and giving the Union control of the Mississippi River. General Grant's reputation soared, setting the stage for his eventual promotion to General-in-Chief of the Union armies. General Jeff G. Private Blackburn and his comrades began the process of reconstruction, both physically and mentally. Letters to Mary expressed his hope that the end of the war was in sight and his longing to return home. The shared experiences of the siege forged deep bonds among the soldiers, a brotherhood born of hardship and sacrifice. Emma Balfour continued to document the aftermath in her diary, chronicling the slow recovery of the city and its people. Dr. Balfour's work was far from over, as he tended to the lingering wounds of a city that had endured so much. The resilience of Vicksburg's residents and soldiers alike was a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. With the surrender of Vicksburg, Union forces moved in to occupy the city. Major General James B. McPherson was tasked with overseeing the transition. His troops worked to restore order, distribute food, and rebuild the shattered infrastructure. Among his ranks, Lieutenant Colonel James H. Wilson continued his vital engineering work, ensuring that supply lines were established and the city's defenses repurposed for Union use. Private William H. Blackburn and his fellow soldiers were amazed at the stark contrast between their military camp and the devastated city. Despite their victory, they were now faced with the daunting task of rebuilding Vicksburg and ensuring that its residents were cared for. Emma Balfour, ever the chronicler, noted the arrival of Union troops with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Her husband, Dr. William T. Balfour, continued his tireless work in the hospital, now treating Union soldiers as well. Emma's diary entries from this period reveal a city in the throes of recovery, its citizens grappling with the new reality of Union occupation. Confederate Lieutenant Colonel E.G.S. McNeely, now a parolee, found himself struggling with the defeat and the aftermath. He remained in Vicksburg, assisting with the transition in any way he could, and reflecting on the cause for which he had fought so hard. As the days turned into weeks, General Grant initiated efforts to reconcile the divided community. He understood that a lasting peace required not just military victory, but also the healing of deep wounds. He met with local leaders, including influential figures like Emma Balfour, to discuss the future of Vicksburg. Grant's approach was pragmatic and humane. He knew that the support of Vicksburg's citizens was crucial for maintaining order and rebuilding the city. His policies aimed at reintegration rather than punishment, fostering a cautious hope among the war-weary population. Bruce criticism. Private Blackburn continued to write to his wife Mary, sharing his experiences and expressing his longing for home. His letters, full of vivid descriptions of the siege and the subsequent occupation, also reflected his growing understanding of the complexities of war. Blackburn's correspondence became a source of inspiration for his comrades, who eagerly listened as he read aloud Mary's replies. Lieutenant Colonel James H. Wilson also wrote to his family, detailing the engineering feats accomplished during the siege and the ongoing work to secure Vicksburg. His pride in the Union's achievements was tempered by a deep respect for the resilience of the Confederate defenders and the civilians caught in the crossfire. Control of the Mississippi River was a strategic victory for the Union, effectively splitting the Confederacy in two. Admiral David Dixon Porter, who had played a crucial role in the naval operations leading up to the siege, now worked closely with General Grant to secure the river and ensure the flow of supplies. The reopening of the Mississippi River was celebrated by Union forces and Northern citizens alike. It symbolized not just a military victory, but also the promise of a united nation. Grant's vision of a restored Union was beginning to take shape even as the war continued elsewhere. Dr. William T. Balfour's hospital was a testament to the human cost of the siege. Soldiers from both sides lay side by side, their wounds tended by Balfour and his team of dedicated nurses. The hospital became a microcosm of the broader conflict, where shared suffering transcended divisions. Emma Balfour's diary entries during this time reveal the emotional toll on the city's residents. She wrote about the difficulty of seeing former enemies treated with the same care as friends, and the slow, painful process of rebuilding trust and community. As the weeks went by, the soldiers of the 45th Illinois and other Union regiments shared their stories of the siege. These narratives, full of bravery, hardship, and camaraderie, became part of the collective memory of Vicksburg. Sergeant John C. Hauser, a friend of Private Blackburn, often gathered men around the campfire to recount their experiences, fostering a sense of unity and purpose. The Confederate soldiers, now parolees, also shared their stories. Lieutenant Colonel McNeely and his men spoke of their determination, their struggles, and the ultimate realization that their cause had been lost. These exchanges, though difficult, were crucial steps toward reconciliation. By the end of the summer, Vicksburg was slowly beginning to recover. Union efforts to rebuild the city were met with both gratitude and resentment from its residents. The scars of war were deep, but the resilience of the human spirit was evident in the determination of both soldiers and civilians to move forward. General Grant, now preparing for his next campaigns, left Vicksburg with a sense of accomplishment and hope. His leadership during the siege had not only secured a strategic victory, but also laid the groundwork for the healing of a divided nation. Private Blackburn, Sergeant Hauser, Lieutenant Colonel Wilson, and the countless others who had endured the siege carried with them the lessons of Vicksburg. Their experiences, forged in the crucible of war, would shape their futures and the future of the nation they fought to preserve. The guns had finally fallen silent in Vicksburg, but the echoes of war still lingered in the minds and hearts of those who survived. As summer turned to fall, the city began to take on a semblance of normalcy. The Union soldiers, under General McPherson's command, focused on rebuilding infrastructure and providing aid to the beleaguered population. Private Blackburn found himself assigned to a new duty, helping to clear the debris and rebuild the shattered homes of Vicksburg. The work was backbreaking, but it provided a sense of purpose. Every brick laid and every nail hammered felt like a step toward healing. Blackburn often thought of Mary and their farm back in Illinois, and the letters from her continued to be his lifeline. In the aftermath of the siege, life in Vicksburg gradually returned to a routine, albeit a changed one. The city, once a bustling Confederate stronghold, was now under Union control. The Union soldiers who occupied the city worked tirelessly to maintain order and assist in the recovery efforts. Lieutenant Colonel Wilson, ever the engineer, was tasked with overseeing the reconstruction of critical infrastructure, including the railways and telegraph lines. His meticulous attention to detail ensured that the city could reconnect with the outside world, facilitating the flow of goods and information. Wilson's dedication to his work inspired both Union soldiers and Vicksburg civilians, who saw in him a model of perseverance and resilience. Dr. William T. Balfour's role as a surgeon continued to be vital in the post-siege recovery. The influx of both Union and Confederate wounded required constant care, and Dr. Balfour's skills were in high demand. His makeshift hospital was a haven for the injured, where compassion knew no sides. Emma Balfour's diary entries from this time reflect the slow but steady progress being made. She wrote about the small acts of kindness and cooperation that were beginning to bridge the divide between former enemies. Her observations highlighted the humanity that persisted despite the horrors of war. The Confederate soldiers who had been paroled faced an uncertain future. Lieutenant Colonel McNeely, like many of his men, grappled with the implications of their defeat. The terms of their parole allowed them to return home, but the journey was fraught with challenges. Many had lost everything in the war and had to start over from scratch. Not only did he reprogram himself to return to a farm, he began making art and began paintings. He believed that, by contributing to the rebuilding of the city, he could find some measure of redemption and purpose. His presence, along with other paroled Confederates who chose to stay, played a crucial role in the city's healing process. The Mississippi River, now fully under Union control, became a symbol of reunification. Admiral David Dixon Porter continued to patrol the river, ensuring safe passage for Union supply ships and preventing any Confederate attempts to reclaim the waterway. The river, once a battleground, now flowed with the promise of a united future. For the citizens of Vicksburg, the river's reclamation brought a sense of hope. Trade resumed, and with it, the flow of goods and opportunities. The city's economy, though battered, began to show signs of revival. The people of Vicksburg, both old residents and new arrivals, worked together to rebuild their lives and their community. The Union soldiers who remained in Vicksburg formed close-knit communities, bonded by their shared experiences. Sergeant Hauser and Private Blackburn, having survived the siege together, became fast friends. They spent their evenings discussing their dreams and plans for the future, finding solace in each other's company. However, not all interactions were harmonious. Tensions occasionally flared between Union soldiers and Vicksburg's residents, as old animosities surfaced. General McPherson and his officers worked diligently to mediate these conflicts, emphasizing the importance of cooperation and mutual respect. Efforts to foster reconciliation continued, led by community leaders and Union officials. General Grant's policies aimed at integrating the Southern states back into the Union without punitive measures were instrumental in this process. Educational programs and public work projects were introduced to help rebuild the social and economic fabric of the South. Spaniard systems conceptual, and constitutional in suspension programs were instrumental in this process. Emma Balfour, in her diary, documented the slow but steady progress of these initiatives. She wrote about meetings between Union and Confederate veterans, where shared experiences and mutual respect began to dissolve old hatreds. The seeds of reconciliation were being planted, though the path ahead was still fraught with challenges. As the months passed, those who had lived through the siege found themselves reflecting on their experiences. Private Blackburn often thought about the friends he had lost and the horrors he had witnessed. His letters to Mary became more introspective as he tried to make sense of the chaos and find meaning in the sacrifices made. Lieutenant Colonel McNeely too grappled with his role in the war and its aftermath. He wrote to his family, expressing his hopes for a peaceful future and his commitment to helping rebuild the South. McNeely's letters were filled with a deep sense of duty and a desire to contribute to a better future. The winter of 1864 brought both challenges and opportunities to Vicksburg. Union troops worked to winterize their camps, while the city's residents continued their recovery efforts. The bond between soldiers and civilians grew stronger, as both groups realized that their fates were intertwined. General Grant, now looking ahead to future campaigns, remained committed to the cause of reunification. His leadership and vision were instrumental in shaping the post-siege landscape of Vicksburg. The city, though scarred, was on the path to healing and reconstruction, embodying the resilience and determination of its people. As the new year approached, the people of Vicksburg dared to hope for a brighter future. The hardships of the siege and its aftermath had forged a community resilient and united in its determination to rebuild. The soldiers, civilians, and former Confederates, who had endured so much together, now looked forward to the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. Private Blackburn, Sergeant Hauser, Lieutenant Colonel Wilson, Dr. Balfour, and Emma Balfour each had played a role in the story of Vicksburg. Their experiences, interwoven with the larger narrative of the Civil War, were a testament to the strength of the human spirit. The lessons learned and the bonds formed during this tumultuous period would endure, guiding them as they faced the future with hope and determination. As the harsh winter of 1864 set in, the citizens and soldiers in Vicksburg faced new challenges. Supplies were scarce, and the cold weather added to the hardships. Union soldiers, under the command of General McPherson to survive, leading Palmer, Private William H. Blackburn and Sergeant John C. Hauser were stationed at one of the makeshift barracks, ensuring that the newly arrived Union reinforcements were settled in. The bond between the men grew stronger as they shared stories around the campfire, finding warmth in camaraderie during the cold winter nights. General Ulysses S. Grant, now stationed in Vicksburg, faced the immense burden of leadership. He knew that the success of the Union's efforts depended on maintaining order and morale among his troops. He often met with his officers, including General McPherson and Lieutenant Colonel James H. Wilson, to discuss strategies for the ongoing war. Grant's leadership was characterized by his pragmatic approach and his ability to inspire confidence in his men. He understood the importance of clear communication and often wrote detailed letters to President Lincoln and other military leaders, outlining his plans and the progress being made. For the civilians of Vicksburg, the winter months were a time of rebuilding. Emma Balfour continued her work, documenting the daily struggles and triumphs of the city's residents in her diary. Her husband, Dr. William T. Balfour, remained a constant presence at the hospital, tending to the wounded and sick. The Balfours' home became a hub of activity as neighbors gathered to share resources and support one another. Emma's diary entries from this time reflect a sense of resilience and hope as the community came together to rebuild their lives. As the Union Army consolidated its hold on Vicksburg, strategic discussions took place regarding the next steps in the war effort. General Grant, in particular, was focused on how to leverage the victory at Vicksburg to further weaken the Confederacy. He frequently consulted with Admiral David Dixon Porter, whose naval expertise was crucial in maintaining control of the Mississippi River. Lieutenant Colonel James H. Wilson played a key role in these discussions, using his engineering skills to devise plans for future campaigns. His meticulous attention to detail ensured that the Union Army was prepared for any eventuality. The letters sent by soldiers to their families back home provided a glimpse into their thoughts and emotions during this challenging period. Private Blackburn's letters to Mary were filled with longing and hope. He described the daily routines, the challenges of winter, and his dreams of returning home once the war was over. Lieutenant Colonel Wilson also wrote frequently to his family, sharing his experiences and expressing his pride in the accomplishments of his fellow soldiers. His letters were a source of comfort and encouragement for his loved ones, who eagerly awaited news from the front. The paroled Confederate soldiers, including Lieutenant Colonel E.G.S. McNeely, faced the difficult task of reintegrating into civilian life. Many of them returned to their homes, only to find them in ruins. The journey back was fraught with challenges as they navigated a landscape devastated by war. McNeely's determination to rebuild his life and contribute to the recovery of the South was unwavering. He found solace in helping his fellow parolees, offering support and guidance as they faced the uncertainties of the post-war world. Dr. William T. Balfour's work in the hospital highlighted the medical advances being made during the war. The experiences of treating soldiers with a wide range of injuries and illnesses led to improvements in surgical techniques and medical care. Dr. Balfour's dedication to his patients and his willingness to embrace new methods made him a respected figure in the medical community. Emma Balfour's diary entries provide valuable insights into the daily operations of the hospital and the challenges faced by medical personnel. Her observations reveal the human side of the war, capturing the resilience and compassion of those who worked tirelessly to save lives. As the new year of 1864 dawned, the people of Vicksburg were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The hardships of the past year had forged a strong and resilient community. Union soldiers and civilians alike looked forward to the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. General Grant, ever the strategist, used the occasion to rally his troops and remind them of their mission. His speeches and orders reflected his determination to see the war through to a successful conclusion, inspiring his men to continue their efforts with renewed vigor. Private Blackburn and Sergeant Hauser continued their duties with a sense of pride and commitment. The daily routines of camp life were interspersed with moments of reflection and camaraderie. The soldiers took solace in the bonds they had formed and the shared experiences that connected them. Blackburn often thought of his wife, Mary, and the life they would build once the war was over. His letters home were filled with dreams of a future free from conflict, where they could live in peace and prosperity. The Union's strategic movements in the wake of the Vicksburg victory were carefully planned and executed. General Grant and his officers worked tirelessly to ensure that their next campaigns would build on their successes. The coordination between the Army and Navy, under the leadership of Admiral Porter, was crucial in maintaining momentum. Lieutenant Colonel Wilson's engineering expertise was once again called upon as plans were drawn up for future offensives. His meticulous work ensured the Union forces were well prepared for the challenges ahead, reinforcing their positions and securing their supply lines. The resilience of Vicksburg's civilians continued to be a source of inspiration. Emma Balfour's diary entries captured the spirit of a community determined to rebuild and thrive. She wrote about the efforts to repair homes, reopen businesses, and restore a sense of normalcy to daily life. The community's efforts were supported by Union soldiers who worked alongside civilians to rebuild the city. This collaboration fostered a sense of unity and shared purpose, bridging the divide between former enemies. The price of war was evident in the scars left on Vicksburg and its people. The physical and emotional toll of the siege and its aftermath was a constant reminder of the conflict's cost. Dr. Balfour's hospital remained a place of healing, where soldiers and civilians alike sought treatment and solace. Emma Balfour's observations highlighted the long road to recovery, but also the unwavering determination of the people of Vicksburg. Her diary entries serve as a testament to the strength of the human spirit, capturing moments of both sorrow and hope. As the war continued, some soldiers began to return home, their terms of service complete. Private Blackburn and Sergeant Hauser watched as their comrades departed, filled with a mixture of envy and hope. The prospect of returning to civilian life was both exciting and daunting. As they faced the challenge of reintegration, the letters from returning soldiers provided valuable insights into the post-war experience. Their stories of adjustment and resilience served as a source of inspiration for those still in the field, reminding them of the life that awaited them after the war. General Grant's vision for the post-war South was characterized by a commitment to reconciliation and reconstruction. He understood the importance of rebuilding not just the physical infrastructure, but also the social fabric of the region. His policies aimed at fostering unity and cooperation, laying the groundwork for a lasting peace. Grant's leadership was instrumental in shaping the future of Vicksburg and the broader South. His pragmatic approach and emphasis on mutual respect and collaboration set the tone for the efforts to come. The efforts to rebuild Vicksburg continued to bear fruit. As the city slowly regained its vitality, businesses reopened, schools resumed classes, and the community began to thrive once more. The collaboration between Union soldiers and Vicksburg's residents created a sense of unity and shared purpose. Emma Balfour's diary entries from this time reflect a growing sense of optimism. She wrote about the progress being made and the resilience of her fellow citizens, capturing the spirit of a community determined to overcome its past and build a brighter future. The bonds formed between soldiers during the siege and its aftermath endured long after the conflict ended. Private Blackburn and Sergeant Hauser remained close friends, their shared experiences forging a deep connection. They often spoke of their plans for the future, dreaming of a life beyond the battlefield. Lieutenant Colonel Wilson's leadership and dedication continued to inspire his men. His focus on preparation and planning ensured that the Union forces remained strong. and ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Education played a crucial role in the recovery and rebuilding efforts in Vicksburg. Schools reopened and new educational initiatives were introduced to help bridge the divide between former Confederates and Union supporters. These efforts aimed at fostering understanding and cooperation, laying the foundation for a united future. Emma Balfour's involvement in these educational initiatives was instrumental. Her passion for learning and her dedication to her community made her a respected figure in Vicksburg's recovery efforts. Her diary entries from this time reflect her commitment to building a better future for all. As the spring of 1864 approached, the future of Vicksburg looked brighter than ever. The city's recovery efforts were yielding results, and the community's resilience was evident in every aspect of daily life. The collaboration between Union soldiers and Vicksburg's residents continued to strengthen, creating a sense of unity and shared purpose. General Grant's leadership and vision played a crucial role in shaping this future. His commitment to reconciliation and reconstruction set the tone for the efforts to come, ensuring that the sacrifices made during the siege would not be in vain. Quote, "We virtually well expected and hoped for excellences." Unquote. The reflections on the sacrifices made during the siege of Vicksburg were a constant presence in the minds of those who had lived through it. Private Blackburn often thought of the friends he had lost and the hardships he had endured. His letters to Mary were filled with a sense of gratitude for the opportunities that lay ahead and a determination to honor the memory of those who had fallen. Lieutenant Colonel McNeely, too, reflected on his experiences and the lessons learned. His commitment to rebuilding the South and contributing to its recovery was unwavering, driven by a deep sense of duty and responsibility. As the war continued, the people of Vicksburg remained focused on the road ahead. The challenges of recovery and reconstruction were immense, but the community's resilience and determination provided hope for the future. The bonds formed during the siege and its aftermath served as a foundation for the efforts to come. Trukmaya, General Grant, Private Blackburn, Sergeant Hauser, Lieutenant Colonel Wilson, Dr. Balfour, and Emma Balfour all played a role in the story of Vicksburg. Their experiences, interwoven with the larger narrative of the Civil War, were a testament to the strength of the human spirit. The lessons learnt and the bonds formed during this tumultuous period would endure, guiding them as they faced the future with hope and determination.